Hope everyone had a great weekend. The hour of convening has arrived. I'd like to call the Senate chambers to order, and at this time I'd like to ask all unauthorized persons to exit the chamber. I'd like to recognize my great friend, well-dressed senator from the 53rd.
Mr. President, thank you very much. It's a great day, a little overcast, but it's going to be a great day because the members of the Senate is ready to work hard for the people of Georgia. On this date, a moment in history, in 1969, the Allman Brothers Band was formed, and since then gave us great pleasure in all their wonderful blues music. The journal's been read and found to be correct.
Is there objection to dispensing with the reading of the journal? Hearing none, the reading of the journal is dispensed with. Is there objection to the confirmation of the journal? The chair hears none, and the journal is confirmed. All senators who have bills and resolutions, please bring them up to the Secretary's desk at this time. Mr. Secretary, first reading and reference of Senate bills and resolutions, please.
Senate Bill 261 by Senator Jordan VI, a bill be titled an act to amend an act to create a Board of Elections and Registration in Cobb County, approved March 28.
State and local government.
Senate Bill 262 by Senator Harbison of the 15th and others, a bill be titled an act to amend Chapter 2 of Title 47 of the OCGA relating to the Employees Retirement System of Georgia so as to provide that if a beneficiary...
Retirement.
Senate Bill 263 by Senator Brass of the 28th and others, a bill be titled an act to authorize the probate court of Tripp County to charge a technology fee to specify the uses to which said...
State and local government.
Senate Resolution 435 by Senator Robertson of the 29th and others, a resolution urging the state of Georgia to increase its cigarette excise tax to offset...
Finance.
Senate Resolution 436 by Senator Jones of the 25th, a resolution honoring the life of Congressman Michael Allen Mack Collins and dedicating a road in his memory for other purposes.
Transportation.
Senate Resolution 442 by Senator Walker of the 20th and others, a resolution creating the Senate Study Committee on creating a Georgia Agricultural Marketing Authority for other purposes.
Rules.
Mr. President, that concludes the order.
First reading and reference of House bills.
House Bill 613 by Representative Holmes of the 129th and others, a bill be titled an act to amend an act providing a new charter for the city of Flowvilla, approved April 5th, 1993, as amended. So as the
State and local government.
House Bill 622 by Representative Williams of the 145th and others, a bill be titled an act to amend an act providing for the membership of the Sinclair Water Authority, approved April 13th, 2001, as amended. So
State and local government.
House Bill 625 by Representative Smith of the 70th and others, bill be titled an act to authorize the governing authority of Coweta County to levy an excise tax pursuant to subsection P of Code Section 48.
State and local government.
House Bill 626 by Representative Smith of the 70th and others, a bill be titled an act to authorize the governing authority of the city of Newnan to levy an excise tax pursuant to subsection
State and local government.
Mr. President, that concludes the order.
Secretary will now read reports of standing committees, please.
Mr. President, Senate Committee on Rules has had our consideration following the legislation instructing the board to stand back to the Senate for recommendation. Senate Resolution 87 do pass. Senate Resolution 222 do pass. Senate Resolution 263 do pass. Senate Resolution 318 do pass. Senate Resolution 328 do pass. Senate Resolution 341 do pass. And Senate Resolution 433 do pass. Senator Moles of the 53rd. And Mr. President, Senate Committee on Rules has had our consideration following the legislation instructing the board to stand back to the Senate for recommendation. House Bill 186, pursuant to Senate Rule 2-1.10C, the Committee on Rules recommends that HB 186 do pass by substitute, sent by Senator Moles of the 53rd. That concludes the order.
Secretary will now read bills and resolutions for the second time.
House Bill 239 by Representative Administration of the 104th and others, Georgia Business Court established. House Bill 276 by Representative Harold, the 106th and others, sales and use tax. Certain persons that facilitate certain retail sales require collection of tax. House Bill 288 by Representative Powell, the 32nd and others. Superior courts revise the sums that the clerks are entitled to charge and collect for filing documents and instruments pertaining to real estate or personal property. House Bill 472 by Representative Reeds of the 34th and others, Juvenile Code, procedures concerning removal considerations revised. House Resolution 239 by Representative Stevens of the 164th, Savannah Logistics Technology Innovation Corridor designate. Mr. President, that concludes the order.
It is now time for our morning roll call. Are there any motions to excuse? The chair recognizes the senator from the 56th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd ask for unanimous consent to excuse the senators from the 17th and the 19th.
Senators from the 17th and 19th are excused. Chair recognizes the senator from the 2nd.
Mr. President, I'd like for unanimous consent to excuse the senator from the 12th.
Without objection, the senator from the 12th is excused. Chair recognizes the senator from the 35th.
Mr. President, I wish to excuse number 33, Senate District 33 and 38 for business inside the.
Without objection, the senators from the 33rd and the 38th are excused. Chair recognizes the senator from the 55th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask unanimous consent to excuse the senator from the 36th.
Without objection, the senator from the 36th is excused. The chair recognizes the senator from the 13th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask unanimous consent to excuse the senator from the 16th for business inside the Capitol.
Without objection, the senator from the 16th is excused. Are there any other motions to excuse? Secretary will call the roll of the senators. Signify your presence by voting the yea switch. The secretary will unlock the machine. It is now time for a morning devotional. It is now time for a morning devotional, and I'd like to ask all senators to please take your seats. Please take your seats and cease all audible conversations in preparation for our chaplain of the day. Doorkeepers, please secure the doors. I'd like to recognize our friend from the 2nd to lead us in our Pledge of Allegiance and introduce us to our chaplain of the day.
Let's please stand for our pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, for which is differences in all. And our Georgia flag. I pledge allegiance to our Georgia flag and the principles for which it stands, wisdom, justice, moderation. Good morning. Before I introduce our pastor of the day, I would first like to introduce his lovely wife and his family, the Morris family. Our pastor for the day is the Reverend Quentin Morris Sr. Reverend Morris is a native of Talladega, Alabama, and the son of Mr. and Mrs. Robert Morris. Pastor Morris has a bachelor's degree in ministry and a minor in counseling from Bruton Parker College in Mount Vernon, Georgia. Has a master's of divinity from Ambridge University in Montgomery, Alabama. Pastor Morris has served as the moderator of the Ludowici District of the Tatno Missionary Baptist Association and is a certified teacher for the National Baptist Convention. Pastor Morris is an appointed board member of the School of Evangelism at Bruton Parker College in Mount Vernon, Georgia. Pastor Morris is now serving as pastor of Tremont Temple Missionary Baptist Church in Savannah, Georgia. But more importantly, Pastor Morris has a zeal for God and a willingness to serve the Lord. He is sold out to a life of preaching and teaching the good news of Jesus. He is a family man that values time spent with his family, a devoted Christian, and a true public servant. I'd like to introduce Reverend Morris.
Thank you, Senator Jackson. First of all, good morning to the governor of this great state, Mr. Brian Kemp, and the president of the Senate, Mr. Jeffrey Duncan, and to all the legislators and senators of the state of Georgia. Good morning. It's a grand opportunity to stand before you this morning in this hall to give the invocation as well as the prayer for this first and new session of the General Assembly. I understand you only have 40 days, so I'm not going to take much longer than 3 or 4 hours here. A great writer by the name of Peter Drucker said, management is doing what's right. Leadership is doing the right thing. Each of you here have been elected by your respective district to do what's right for the people that you represent. The voters have spoken. You are here to do the business of this state. But as a pastor of the gospel, I want you to know you're not alone in doing God's business. As legislators, you have a tremendous job to do, but you're not alone. You're guided by the hands of one who is greater than each of us. The footprints are beside you as you walk the halls of this Capitol and throughout the city of Atlanta. His voice is there to tell you what's best for your constituents. So as you start this session today, let us bow our heads and go into prayer and ask our Heavenly Father for wisdom and support as we do the business for these great people of the state of Georgia. I'd like to leave you a scripture from the Holy Writ and give you 5 points, and I'll take my seat and head back to South Georgia. Matthew 18:20 says, "For where 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, there am I in the midst of them." I feel when you have our God in the midst of any session, any meeting, especially here in this great state of Georgia, 5 things will always come out of this great hall of the state capitol. First of all, compassion. You got to have a sense of compassion. The Lord that I serve had compassion on people, and the one that you have served has compassion. Sometimes we have to look beyond our personal feelings, beyond where we live, what we drive, and have compassion on someone that's least or left out or less fortunate. Not only must we have compassion, but you must also have conviction. At some point, you must be convicted by the call that you have been called to do something greater than you. The conviction to do something to help someone that may not be able to help themselves. There's thousands of people dependent on decisions that's made here today. So let the God we serve give you some type of conviction. Not only that, there must be cooperation. There's different parties up in here, different races, different creeds, different background. But I believe in any church, any setting, any organization, there must be cooperation. I believe when you have God in the midst of anything, especially this session here, cooperation can bring out the biggest glory that this state can ever see, even this nation. And we also, number 4, must have commitment. Not just these 40 days, but your senator year-round. I see people like Lester Jackson in my town and my House Representative, Mr. Al Williams. They're not just representing when they're here in Atlanta. They're committed to the cause year-round there in South Georgia. And lastly, you must have courage. You got to have a voice that people that may never make it to the state capitol say. There's people that need you to have courage because people depend on you to make decisions that can bring a great outcome. So as the clergy of the day, I challenge you to let this be more than just bills and laws, legislations, debates, and political differences be in the midst of you. I challenge you to let God be in the midst of every one of you. Let us pray. Almighty God, as we gather together today with the intent to do good and the good work of your people, we seek to represent fairly and well those who have given us this task. We come before you to give honor and praise for your worthy and your worthiness. You are the source of all that is good. We ask for your hand of blessing on this session. We are asking, dear Father, that you grant in each member of this body the wisdom to govern with the king and thirst for justice and righteousness, confidence in what is good and fitting for the ability to work together in harmony. We seek blessings on the task before us today. Bless the efforts of every senator, legislator here. Give them clear insight as they deliberate with wisdom and work with clarity and accuracy and decision with impartiality. Dear Father, it was your promise that where two or three are gathered together, you would be in the midst. Not just this session, but any time these sessions come together, here and even across the hall, we need you to be in the midst here at the state capitol. Today we ask you that you will open the ears that we may hear your voice. Open our mind that we may receive your eternal wisdom. Open our spirit that we may know you are leading and guiding us. Open our heart that we will receive your wonderful love. It is in the name of the one that's still able to turn water into wine, we ask these blessings. Let your heart say amen, amen, amen. God bless you and have a wonderful day.
Are there any unanimous consents? We have some special guests with us today that we would like to recognize. Will the Secretary read the resolution?
Senate Resolution 405 and Senate Resolution 406 by Senator Sims of the 12th. Resolutions commending the Calhoun County High School boys basketball team for winning the 2019 GHSA 1A State Basketball Championship and commending the Calhoun County High School girls basketball team for placing second in the 2019 GHSA 1A State Basketball Championship. And for other purposes, that will be resolved by the Senate that the members of this body commend the Calhoun County High School boys basketball team and girls basketball team for winning the championships and extend their most sincere best wishes for continued success. That concludes the order.
Is there objection to adoption of the resolution? The chair hears none, and the resolution is adopted. I'd like to call upon the senator from the 12th to introduce our special guests today.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. President. My folks from Calhoun County have traveled 3 to 4 hours. So I hope that you will give them your undivided attention, because that's a long ways getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning to come and see us. And I am so proud of these gentlemen. Commending the Calhoun County High School boys basketball team for winning the 2019 GHSA 1A State Basketball Championship. The Calhoun County High School boys basketball team has established and maintained a proud tradition of excellence with equal emphasis on character and academics. This superlative team has completed a triumphant, undefeated season of basketball competition by posting an outstanding record of 32 wins before securing the championship. And this morning, they are here to visit with us. They are just as proud as we are and just as awed as we are looking at you guys and what you do. But I want you to give them a very, very hearty welcome. In the meantime, when I'm done speaking, the principal of the Calhoun County High School in Southwest Georgia, Mrs. Lubin, will come and say a few words to you guys. Thank you so very much. Ms. Lubin?
Thank you for inviting us. We are excited about what our children have been able to accomplish this year, one game at a time on the court. But more importantly, we have students who are academically and characteristically sound. They do what it takes on and off the court to represent our community, their families, and our state in a manner that is becoming any student that comes through Calhoun County High School. I cannot tell you how proud I am to be the principal, the winningest principal in the state of Georgia. And these young men, day in and day out, took every single game and everything that they have been taught and the characteristics that their parents have taught them. And these great coaches behind me, Coach Marcus Shaw and Coach Stacy Carter, along with my seniors that are behind me, and put one win together to go throughout the season undefeated. And so today, we thank you for the invitation and the ability for our students to come through and for you all to congratulate them and let them know that someone else is as proud of them as I am. We appreciate the invite and we thank you. I'm very proud of you, young man.
If you would turn around in the gallery, you will see the remainder of the team. And guys, you look so spiffy. You look so great. Thank you so much.
Good job. Good job. Great job. Let's go down here and take the picture. Mr. Secretary, will you read the caption for the resolution for our next set of special guests?
Senate Resolution 414 and Senate Resolution 415 by Senators Heath of the 31st and Dugan of the 30th. Resolutions commending Coach Ryan Dyer and the North Paulding County High School boys basketball team for winning the 2019 All-County State Championship and for other purposes, and commending Coach Scott Green of the North Paulding girls basketball team for winning Coach of the Year, All-County Awards for the 2018-2019 season and for other purposes. Now therefore be resolved by the Senate that members of this body commend Coach Ryan Dyer and Coach Scott Green for winning the 2019 All-County State Championships and extend their most sincere best wishes for continued success. That concludes the order.
Is there objection to adoption of the resolution? The chair hears none, and the resolution is adopted. I'd like to call upon the senator from the 31st to introduce a great group of special guests with us today.
Thank you, Governor. It gives me great honor to recognize today the athletes and coaches of various Paulding County basketball teams for their accomplishments this season. The guests we have here on the platform today are Player of the Year Amani Smith from Hiram High School, Newcomer of the Year Ariel Owens, also Hiram High School, Coach of the Year Scott Green, North Paulding High School, Boys Player of the Year Jacob Harris, North Paulding High School, Newcomer of the Year John Cook, Paulding County High School, and Coach of the Year Ryan Dyer, North Paulding High. We also have with us on the platform Superintendent Brian Otot and board members Jason Anavatarte and Jeff Fuller. We also have other board members, athletes and coaches, families here in the gallery. If you all would stand and let us recognize you. Dr. Otot, would you like to make some comments?
I'd like to start by introducing myself. My name is Brian Otot. I'm superintendent of the Paulding County School District. We're the 12th largest school district in the state of Georgia, and I proudly serve 30,000 students, 3,400 employees, and this is a representative sampling of the great students, the student athletes, and the character kids that we have here in Paulding County. I bring you greetings from our Board of Education, and I'd like to sincerely thank the members in attendance today for their support, but I'd like to give a special thank you to, of course, Senator Heath, Senator Dugan, and Lieutenant Governor for making this such a special day for our student athletes. We're incredibly proud of them and their accomplishments on top of our coaches of the year representing us here this morning, but I'd also like to take a minute to thank the Senate for your support of public education and the Paulding County School District. Thank you.
Mr. Secretary, will you read the resolution for our next set of special guests?
Senate Resolution 439 by Senator Beach of the 21st and others. A resolution commending Thomas Carlton Lewis on his retirement from Georgia State University and for other purposes. Whereas Thomas Carlton Lewis was born in Union Point, Georgia, and learned from his mother Eleanor and father Carlton Lewis the importance of public service. And whereas Thomas Carlton Lewis has walked the halls of this capital for over 40 years, the last 28 years advocating for students, faculty, and staff at Georgia State University and the entire higher education community. Whereas Thomas Carlton Lewis has served under 7 governors, 6 chancellors, and 4 university presidents, and is considered the dean of higher education advocates. Now therefore be resolved by the Senate that the members of this body commend Thomas Carlton Lewis for his extraordinary career in public service and thank him for his many years of service to the university system of Georgia. That concludes the order.
Is there objection to adoption of the resolution? The chair hears none, and the resolution is adopted. It is my honor to be able to call upon the senator from the 21st to be able to introduce and recognize a very good friend of mine and our special guest today.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senators, I bring before you Senate Resolution 439. We are going to honor Tom Lewis, who's retiring after 40 years of public service. 40 years of public service. And I'm joined on the rostrum with the senator from the 14th and President Mark Becker from Georgia State. Thank you for being here. You know, as he said in the resolution, Tom's parents instilled in him the importance of public service. So let's look at his public service. After graduating from Georgia Southern, Tom worked for the late Senator Richard Russell. He also worked on President Jimmy Carter's campaign. Then Tom served as Chief of Staff for Governor Joe Frank Harris. Tom has walked the halls of this Capitol for over 40 years, but we're honoring him now for the last 28 years for Georgia State University, advocating for higher education, and he is considered the Dean of Higher Education Advocates. Think about this, folks. Tom has served under 7 governors, 6 chancellors, and 4 university presidents. I would say he's a survivor. He should go get on that TV show Survivor, because he has been a survivor. He plans to retire with his wife, Patty, of 45 years. On a personal note, Tom has told me stories. He's taught me the history of this state, and I appreciate his wisdom, and more importantly, Tom, I appreciate your friendship. The Senate wants to thank you for your years of service to our state, and we want to wish you well in your retirement. Congratulations. I now would like to turn it over to Tom Lewis to say a few words.
Lieutenant Governor Duncan, Chairman Brandon Beach, my good friend, Chairman Burt Jones, my good friend and Senator Bruce Thompson, ladies and gentlemen of the Senate. You know, in March, there's something they call March Madness. By the way, Georgia State was the only school that went this year, even though we didn't successful. But anyway, there's something in March Madness that they refer to as a moment in time. And I cannot tell you how honored I am that you would give me this small moment in time. I appreciate it from the bottom of my heart, and it means more than I could ever express. I have had the opportunity to work with some of you for many years over a lot of issues, of a lot of discussions, and a lot of debates, and I appreciate it. In fact, I was here when Wilton Hill, Chairman Jack Hill's dad, was a lobbyist. Now, he's your dean, and Chairman Jack Hill's dad was a lobbyist and one of the most respected and honorable men that I knew. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. And I appreciate the chairman of appropriations and all he's done for this state. What a unselfish and dedicated servant. I have been here, matter of fact, through 8 governors, counting the one we have now, 6 chancellors, and 4 presidents at Georgia State University. It's been a great ride. I did say 10 years ago to my good friend, President Becker, who is here, and I'm honored that he is here. 10 years ago, I said, look, let's just give this 6 more months and I'm going to retire. So 10 years ago, I committed to retiring. And what I refer to is Hurricane Becker hit Georgia State University, and it's been a wild ride, and a lot has been accomplished. Some of you during that time have reminded me that I have been in this Capitol longer than you are old. So simply put, it's time to retire. It's just time to retire. I appreciate the hours and hard work that you give this state. I respect the dedication and the devotion that you have to your constituents and to this state. And I am grateful for all that you do for education and all that you do for higher education, and especially Georgia State University. With your help and your support, we are now rated as the #2 most innovative university in the nation. We have over 53,000 students. We have programs and degrees that have national recognition. So there's a lot going on, and there's a lot more that's going to happen there. Most of all of anything, I appreciate the investment that you make in education. I appreciate the time that you take to learn what we need to do and what we're doing. And I'd like to say to you that that investment will pay greater dividends than anything that you will ever do in this state. Your return on that investment is the greatest thing that you can do. So for all of that, I want to say thank you, and thank you for this opportunity. Now, Lieutenant Governor Duncan, if I may, there's one last thing I'd like to say. I never visioned that I would be standing here and have an opportunity to say this, but I would like to say this bill, having received a registered constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Clerk, we'll read the next bill. Thank you, and may God bless you.
Dr. Becker, you want to say a few words?
Thank you.
That was great. That was great. Mr. Secretary, will you read the resolution for our next special guest?
Senate Resolution 368 by Senator Heath of the 31st and others, a resolution recognizing and commending Alan Poole for his outstanding public service and for other purposes. Whereas Alan Poole has been appointed by Governor Brian P. Kemp as the Executive Director of the Governor's Office of Highway Safety for the vital role that he has played in leadership and his deep personal commitment to the health and welfare of all Georgia citizens. And whereas since 1982, Alan has worked tirelessly with various agencies and groups at the local, county, and state levels where he has served as a member of different boards and committees to lead and learn. And whereas it is abundantly fitting and proper that the outstanding accomplishments of this remarkable and distinguished citizen be appropriately recognized, now therefore be resolved by the Senate that the members of this body recognize and commend Alan Poole for his efficient, effective, unselfish, and dedicated public service and extend the most sincere best wishes for his continued health and happiness. That concludes the order.
Is there objection to adoption of the resolution? The chair hears none, and the resolution is adopted. I'd like to call upon the senator from the 31st to introduce our special guest today.
Thank you, Mr. President. It gives me great honor to recognize a longtime friend of mine and a devoted servant to Haralson County and the state of Georgia. Governor Kemp appointed Alan Poole Director of the Governor's Office of Highway Safety on February the 18th of this year. Director Poole served 14 years as a county commission chairman and executive officer in Haralson County, and in 2017 he was elected to serve as the president of the Association of County Commissioners of Georgia. As a state trooper, Director Poole served 19 years patrolling Georgia's roads and investigating hundreds of traffic crashes across the state, giving him firsthand knowledge of the importance of safe driving. His top priority is to make sure the Governor's Office of Highway Safety stays focused and committed to its mission to educate the public on highway safety and to work to implement programs that will reduce crashes, deaths, and injuries on Georgia roads. Today we have Alan, his wife Mandy, his son Blake Poole, who also serves as in the Middle Georgia Field Office for the Governor. And please join me in recognizing Alan Poole and his family for their accomplishments. Mr. Director, would you like to make some comments?
Mr. President, Senators, I'd just like to take the opportunity to thank Senator Heath and his lovely wife, Miss Susan Heath, for this recognition. And also, if there's anything that we can do for you over at the Office of the Governor of Highway Safety, please feel free to give me a call. Thank you so much.
This time we'd like to introduce our doctor of the day, and I'll call on the senator from the 23rd to do so.
Thank you, Mr. President, colleagues. It's my honor to introduce to you Charles G. Howell, MD. Dr. Howell received his undergraduate degree from Valdosta State College and his medical degree from MCG, where he also completed his general surgery residency. Dr. Howell served as the Surgeon-in-Chief of the Children's Hospital of Georgia from its opening in 1998 until just 6 months ago. As Surgeon-in-Chief of the Children's Hospital of Georgia, he played a key role in obtaining funding for the new Children's Hospital, which recently celebrated its 20th birthday. Dr. Howell reorganized the Department of Surgery in all areas, including adding an acute care surgery service, a new robot, a new hybrid OR for adults, and a hybrid OR for children. He was co-campaign chairman for raising $6 million for a new 23-room Ronald McDonald House, now located out the front door of the Children's Hospital. Dr. Howell retired as chair of surgery and surgeon-in-chief of the Children's Hospital of Georgia 6 months ago, and is now working part-time as a pediatric surgeon and part-time in philanthropy and development. He is an active member of the Children's Advisory Council, and it's been my honor and pleasure to know Dr. Howell for over 30 years. And I'd like to commend him to the Senate. Let's give him a warm Senate welcome. Dr. Howell, would you like to say a few words?
Thank you. I wrote down what I wanted to say because I wanted to make sure I didn't forget it. It's such an honor to be here. I'd like to recognize the Honorable Harold Jones, Lee Anderson, and Jesse Stone, the Honorable Mr. Duncan, and a good friend of mine, the Honorable Jack Hill. It's my pleasure to serve as Doc of the Day. As many of you might not know, I grew up on a tobacco farm in South Georgia. Well, tobacco's not cool anymore, but it was back then. I went to medical school in Augusta, and I trained in pediatric surgery in Philadelphia. I had the opportunity to stay in Philadelphia and work with Dr. Coop, but I decided to come back to Georgia. I've operated on children from every county in the state of Georgia, and I've done over 15,000 operations on children. I retired after 41 years. I believe in philanthropy, and I believe in endowments, and I'm working very hard for charitable contributions to the Children's Hospital and to the Medical College of Georgia. You have a great medical school in Augusta. It is our challenge to keep our graduates, both in primary care, pediatrics, OBGYN, and surgery, to stay in our state. The Medical College of Georgia is a very special place. We need to continue to grow and prosper. We at MCG at Augusta University appreciate your support that you as legislators have shown us. I remind you that it was Governor Zell Miller, Speaker Tom Murphy, Chief Aide Bobby Dwelly, and you guys that appropriated the money to build the Children's Hospital some 20 years ago. For that, we thank you.
Will the clerk read the report from a committee?
Mr. President, the Senate Committee on State and Local Government Operations has had consideration of the following legislation, instructing the board to send back to the Senate with the following recommendation. Senate Bill 244 do pass. Submitted by Senator Kirk of the 13th. That concludes the order.
We are ready for another special presentation for some guests with us today. Will the Secretary read the resolution?
Senate Resolution 1 by Senator Gooch of the 51st and others. A resolution recognizing and commending the 2018 Atlanta Braves and the team's award-winning players and managers and for other purposes. Whereas excellent play, superior teamwork, and extraordinary resilience made this Atlanta Braves team a spectacular one to observe throughout the 2018 season, in which they won their 18th division title in franchise history, which represents a tie with the New York Yankees for the most division titles in baseball history. And whereas the phenomenal performance of the team is a clear indication of the outstanding athletic ability, the dedication and hard work, and the unity of purpose and spirit of each member of the team. And whereas this magnificent team performed with precision during the season and earned its well-deserved reputation for high standards of athletic achievement, the quality of its play, and the stiff competition it presented to its opponents. Now therefore be resolved by the Senate that the members of this body recognize and commend the 2018 Atlanta Braves and the team's award-winning players and manager and extend their most sincere best wishes for continued success. That concludes the order.
Sorry, I was distracted up here. Is there any objection to the adoption of the resolution? The chair hears none, and the resolution is adopted. Before I call upon the senator from the 51st, I'm going to tell a story that tells you how deep-rooted of a Braves fan I am. My first official date with my wife was the night that Sid Bream scored the winning run, so that pretty much locked up our relationship. The second story about the Braves was I got drafted in 1996, and I reported to Utica, New York, to a little field, literally a little field in the middle of nowhere in upstate New York, and the farm director came in, and we were stretching in the outfield, and he said, "Whose car's parked in the parking lot with an Atlanta Braves license plate on the front?" And I proudly raised my hand, and I said, "That's mine." He said, "After you go out there and remove that license plate, you need to drop off a $50 bill on my desk. That's your first fine." I didn't realize they took that seriously since they were in the same division. So it's my honor to bring forward some great guests today and call upon the senator from the 51st to do so.
Thank you, Mr. President. I believe the president's trying to negotiate a contract back here to play a little spring baseball, but I understand his first home run actually came when he married his beautiful wife, Brooke. Is that correct? Boom! Out of the park. Out of the park.
You've already got elected, dude.
I should quit now. I'm so glad that March is almost over. All the madness you've been watching on TV, now it's time for some good old baseball. You know, Georgia's blessed to have so many sports teams with our high school players that we've celebrated here with recently, and of course our college football and basketball, soccer, baseball. But we are so blessed to have this organization in Georgia. We have one of the best teams in baseball. In fact, they've won their 18th title just last year, which ties them with New York Yankees. And I think this will be a good year to break that record. So we have a lot of folks behind us. The executives of the team are here today, and let me introduce them by name, and then we'll bring one up to speak. Terry McGurk is the chairman of the board. Derek Sheeler is the president of the Braves. Brian Snitker is the manager, who is also National League's Manager of the Year. That's a big deal. Greg Heller, who's the vice president and also the legal counsel. I'm not sure why they take their lawyers everywhere they go, but he's a great guy as well. And then Beth Marshall, who is the vice president of communications. We know that we are expecting a great season this year out of the Braves, and we are glad to have them here today. I'd like for you to help me give the Atlanta Braves a warm Senate welcome by introducing Brian Snitker, the Braves general manager, to come and say a few words. Brian?
Well, thank you so much. It's a privilege, an honor to be here this morning and celebrate last year. I mean, it's in a few days, last year is going to be last year, so we're still kind of reaping and reveling in what we accomplished, and it was a great accomplishment. We have a great group of young athletic players. We're probably going to be younger this year than we were last year. I'm bringing some very talented young pitching with us north to go along with the young, talented, energetic, passionate young men that we have that provided such a great year last year. It was a wonderful year. It was exciting for me, for the fans. I used to tell people we're like an NBA game because you don't want to leave because everything happens at the last third of the game. And we did that. And these kids, we have a great spring training. We opened our new spring training facility in Northport yesterday. It's spectacular. If you haven't made reservations to go to spring training, you definitely need to do that because it's a state-of-the-art, probably one-of-a-kind facility that the Atlanta Braves have built there. But we're excited about 2019 and getting it going. We're trending. We're going in the right direction. This thing's got a chance of getting really, really good for a long time. And we love Braves country. We appreciate everyone's support. And like I say, looking forward to everybody coming out and being behind us this year. Please do. If you tell me hello, yell at me from the stands, good things. And like I say, again, we really appreciate you having us here this morning and looking forward to a great 2019. Thank you.
And I left off one of the most important parts of the team, Mike Plant. He's the Vice President of Operations. Mike has been very instrumental in building the Battery. If you haven't been up to the new park, you've got to go. You've got to take your kids and your grandkids up there. Senator from Macon, you need to be up there next week when they come for their opening game. This is a beautiful park. Mike has worked tirelessly for years to put that together, and I was able to go and participate in some of those discussions over the last few years, along with some of the other senators up here on the rostrum. But Mike, thank you for all you've done for Georgia and the economy here.
Here, here. Well done. Let's take some pictures. At this time, does any senator wish to rise on a point of personal privilege? Chair recognizes our friend from the 35th District for a point of personal privilege.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, and good morning. And Senator from the 48th, these are not props. These are not props. Because when you go to your room, I just wanted you to know to look when you go to your offices because you'll have a bag like this. And T-shirt, and we have pink boots on the ground here today. Y'all hold your feet up. Pink boots. And I just wanted to recognize them because they're a great nonprofit, and I'm a part of them. And they're survivors using their voices to free other women suffering from the effects of traumatic experiences. And they are working to enforce the bill that we passed in this Senate that puts the signs for no human trafficking, or if you're trafficked, that you can call this number. So Boots on the Ground has been addressing the issue of human trafficking and transport in and around metropolitan Atlanta by implementing a recognizable brand, bridging awareness with safety and rescue. And after the passage of our bill last year before last, we now have enforcement by organizations such as Pink Boots on the Ground, who are training the workforce. They go out and they go to public places, including but not limited to the strip clubs and massage parlors, truck stops, convenience stores, shops, liquor stores, everywhere that they have people who are suffering and being forced to be on the street corners. And they've been working to mitigate the movement on ongoing community prostitution in high traffic areas. And the list goes on. They do it in the 159 counties. And again, let's recognize Pink Boots on the Ground. Thank you. And we thank you for the goodies that you brought. And I thank you for the pink boots. I was trying to get them on, but he called me before I could. They brought me a pink boot. So thank you for what you do. I'll be out there marching with you and fighting, because I put hands on, and I invite all our legislators to come join us too, especially in their counties. Also, we have Drug-Free America, who's here today for Georgia. And that's Mark Webb. Raise your hand. And both of them are downstairs on the second floor. And it's going to be food and goodies for everyone. It's going to be pamphlets, because Drug-Free America, I know my red light came on, but Drug-Free America, thank you for what you do to educate us, to let us know about illegal drugs. And you can go downstairs and get some pamphlets, and you can order some if you want to take them to your areas. So thank you very much, Mr. President. I yield the well.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 14th for a quick point of personal privilege as he trips through the aisle. He waves. Chair recognizes the senator from the 42nd for a point of personal privilege.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning, colleagues. I am really excited to recognize a very special group that is with us in the gallery this morning. The Grady High School speech and debate team has won its 10th state championship in a row. And that is a pretty amazing feat, as I'm sure we can all agree. It was at the Georgia Forensics Coaches Association Speech and Debate State Championship. And they competed in 12 different categories, ranging from policy and congressional debate to extemporaneous informative speaking. The Grady High School speech and debate team is the only team in the state to have a state champion in every event offered. And it has the most state qualifiers every year of any school. So they are coached by Mario Herrera, Lisa Willoughby, and Lucas Bailey, who's also an alumni of the team. And they have several teachers, Susan Ramsey and Nikolai Curtis, who travel with the team and act as judges, chaperones, and mentors. So I know we can all be very, very proud that Grady High School has had this unparalleled winning streak for speech and debate across the state. And at this time, I'd like them all to stand and be recognized. Good job, team. Wow. Thank you all for your hard work and keep up the routine championships. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the well.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 27th for a point of personal privilege.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wanted to recognize someone in the gallery as well. My friend Johansa George, better known as YG. You can stand up, but don't stand up too long so you'll block the view of the folks behind you. But YG's got a phenomenal story. He went from being homeless and living on the streets to being a business owner and being an inspiration to many. He's a father of 7 and is a great leader in our community, was recently elected to the 2nd vice chair of the Forsyth County Republican Party. And YG, I'm just holding that seat over there warm for you. Whenever you're ready, you just let me know. Thank you, Mr. President.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 48th for a point of personal privilege.
Thank you, Mr. President. Medal of Honor Day is recognized annually on March 25th. So happy Medal of Honor Day. It's a federal holiday that was created in 1991 by President George H.W. Bush to honor the heroism and sacrifice of Medal of Honor recipients for the United States. March 25th marks the first time individuals were recognized with the Medal of Honor in 1863. Since that date, approximately 3,400 Medals of Honor have been awarded, and it is the highest award that someone in the military can earn, and it's usually earned posthumously for something that has been done in battle and the person has lost his or her life. The Medal of Honor is awarded to those who have distinguished themselves conspicuously by gallantry and intrepidity, and it is awarded by the President in the name of the United States Congress. I would like to share one of our own Medal of Honor winners from Georgia, Ronald Eric Ray, Captain, then First Lieutenant, United States Army, Company A, 2nd Battalion, 35th Infantry, 25th Infantry Division. I chose him because my husband served in the 25th Infantry Division and I supported their efforts. He earned this in the Drang Valley, Republic of Vietnam, 19 June 1966. He entered the service from Atlanta, Georgia, and he was born in Cordele, Georgia, 7 December 1941. For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity in action at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty, Captain Ray distinguished himself while serving as a platoon leader with Company A. When one of his ambush patrols was attacked by an estimated reinforced Viet Cong company, Captain Ray organized a reaction force and quickly moved through 2 kilometers of mountainous jungle terrain to the contact area. After breaking through the hostile lines to reach the beleaguered patrol, Captain Ray began directing the reinforcement of the site. When an enemy position pinned down 3 of his men with a heavy volume of automatic weapons fire, he silenced the emplacement with a grenade and killed 4 Viet Cong with his rifle fire. As medics were moving a casualty toward the sheltered position, they began receiving increased intense hostile fire. While directing suppressive fire on the enemy position, Captain Ray moved close enough to silence the enemy with a grenade. A few moments later, Captain Ray saw an enemy grenade land unnoticed near 2 of his men. Without hesitation or regard for his own safety, he dove between the grenade and his men, thus shielding them from the explosion while receiving wounds in his exposed feet and legs. He immediately sustained additional wounds in his legs from an enemy machine gun, but nevertheless, he silenced the emplacement with another grenade. Although suffering great pain from his wounds, Captain Ray continued to direct his men, providing the outstanding courage and leadership they vitally needed, and prevented their annihilation by successfully leading them from their surrounded position. Only after assuring his platoon was no longer in immediate danger did he allow himself to be evacuated for medical treatment. By his gallantry at the risk of his life in the highest traditions of military service, Captain Ray has reflected great credit on himself, his unit, and the United States Army. Ladies and gentlemen, this is just one of approximately 3,400 stories that you would hear of men and women who have been brave and sacrificed themselves for their company mates, teammates under fire. And I am so proud to have gotten to serve with some of these folks and hope to one day live up to all the bravery that they have shown on behalf of our country. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the well.
Thank you, Senator. Chair recognizes the senator from the 34th for a point of personal privilege.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the Senate. On this day, March 25th, I'd like to acknowledge Women History as it is coming to a close for this month. We have in this Georgia State Capitol a living legend in Mrs. Maggie Katie Brown Kidd, who is 114 years of age. Some of you who have been around may remember I had her recognized when she was 110. I'd like for my colleagues to just show by, let me see your hands if you know anybody that is older than 114 years old. Can I see your hands, please? Seeing none, that's a great thing because she is verified the oldest living Georgian, the oldest living African American in the United States, and the 10th oldest living person in the world, according to the Baylor College and Medicine Huffington Center on Aging. Miss Maggie Kidd Brown was born in Oglethorpe, Georgia, December 8th, 1904. She happens to be over on the house side, and because we couldn't get her over here because we didn't know the stream, I wanted to kind of recognize her, but in her absence, I'd like for us to just stand and give this living legend a round of applause, please. Now, my last, Jonesboro High School mock trial team are 10 times champs since 1988. They have won 2 national championships in 2007 and 08. They have won 2. They are competing in the nationals in May, this May, in Athens, Georgia. And Anna Cox is their supervisor. Let's hear it for Jonesboro High School in Clayton County Public Schools, Georgia, for being competing and having such a historic record for mock trial. Thank you, Jonesboro High School. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the will.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 2nd for a point of personal privilege.
Thank you, Mr. President. I stand today to recognize the students from Gordon State College. Most of the students are on a tour, and their special assistant to the president, Ms. LaShawn Sanders, they're with us today. As you know, the Gordon State College is an excellent state college in our state. They're doing great work. We have 3 of the students here doing an outstanding job, recognizing the new vision and representing the new vision for Georgia. Can you please raise your hand? Thank you very much.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 18th for a point of personal privilege.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning, colleagues. I have the honor of representing Crawford County, and we've got some of Crawford County's finest in the gallery with us this morning. Thank you for standing. These are some 11th graders that are going through the Crawford County Youth Leadership Program. They represent the best of what we have in Crawford County to make sure we're going to have a great future, not only in just Crawford County, but also in the days ahead. Also with the students, Jennifer Morton with Flint Energies. I know the Superintendent Brent Lowe is a big supporter, and also Patty Temple with the Chamber is also. So y'all give them a great Senate welcome, would you please? Thank y'all for being here. And one more thing, if I could, on a personal point. Today is my son's 21st birthday, and I'm sure he's not watching, but nonetheless, I do want to tell him happy birthday and that I love him very much. Thank you.
Chair would like to recognize the senator from the 36th for the point of personal privilege.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I rise to lift a voice in response to the heinous hate crime that we saw unfold in Christchurch, New Zealand, scarcely more than a week ago. We're all familiar with it to some extent. 50 people were shot in cold blood in 2 mosques, a deliberate, planned attack fueled by hate and linked to, sadly, the proliferation of hate sites across the internet. A 17-minute video was actually done of that murderous act and circulated around the globe, again fueling potentially more hate and more criminal activity. Hate crimes are a real thing, not somebody's imagination. They're documentable, they're provable, there's evidence that can be used, and 45 states have a hate crime statute on their books. Georgia's effort to do that, sadly, some years back, was inadequate, and so ruled the courts. And we have that task ahead of us to bring Georgia across the finish line with perfecting a hate crimes bill. The attack was motivated by hatred of Muslims, hatred of Islam, hatred of immigrants. All that's been laid out in the internet by these proponents of that crime. And I think we would be remiss as a body if we failed to reach out, express our concern, and join our voices with the voice of the New Zealand Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, who has been very vocal, who donned a hijab and attended the mosque to bring her message of solidarity, support, and sympathy for the families and for the communities. And of course, a hate crime not only impacts those who are directly victimized by it, but it spreads fear throughout the entire community that's been targeted. The Prime Minister of New Zealand said, "The message I have been sharing with every global leader is that our job is to share love and support for our Muslim communities at home and around the world. We are privileged for the first time to have a Muslim brother as a member of our Senate body here as a result of the last elections, and I hope each of us expresses our love and concern for him and the community that's been so horribly targeted in New Zealand. Domestic terrorism for New Zealanders and an international wake-up call, I think, for all of us to be on the side of all of our religious communities and stand together and deplore and decry these sort of attacks. And I would hope and pray that we can find it in our hearts to perfect our own hate crimes legislation that has passed the Senate, has passed the House and is here in the bosom of the Senate. Thank you for your attention. And again, our deepest sympathy to our colleague here in the Senate, as well as the Muslim community around the world. Appreciate your concern.
Thank you, Senator. You have a consent calendar of privileged resolutions before you. Does any senator wish to remove a resolution from the consent calendar? Is there objection to the adoption of the resolution on the consent calendar? The chair hears none, and the resolutions on the consent calendar are adopted. Mr. Secretary, will you read a resolution?
Senate Resolution 443 by Senator Jones of the 10th, a resolution recognizing and commending Dr. Billy C. Chan on his outstanding public service and for contributing to the arena of medical stimulation for other purposes. That concludes the order.
Is there objection to adoption of the resolution? The chair hears none, and the resolution is adopted. Are there any motions to withdraw and commit? You have before you a consent calendar of local bills. Mr. Secretary, have any objections been filed to any of the bills on the local consent calendar?
Mr. President, there are no objections filed.
Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the Committee on State and Local Government Operations, which is favorable to the passage of the bills on the local consent calendar? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. The question is now on the passage of the bills on the local consent calendar. All those in favor will vote yea, opposed nay. The Secretary will unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 52, the nays are 0. This bill on the local consent calendar, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. For what purpose does the senator from the 53rd rise?
Yes, sir, Mr. President. I'd like to ask immediate consent to send Senate Bill 244 to the House.
Senator from the 53rd has asked that Senate Bill 244 be immediately transmitted to the House. Is there objection? Hearing no objection, immediately transferred to the House. Chair recognizes the Majority Leader at this time.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the following bills and resolutions be engrossed: House Bill 287, House Bill 221, and House Bill 186.
The Majority Leader has moved that House Bill 287, 221, and House Bill 186 be engrossed. Will the Secretary read the captions?
House Bill 287 by Representative Dubnik of the 29th and others. The bill will be titled Enactment Article 2 of Chapter 7, Title 40 of the OCGA, relating to imposition, rate, computation, exemptions from income taxes, so as to delete an income tax deduction for certain physicians serving as community-based faculty physicians and for other purposes. House Bill 221 by Representative Roger of the 10th and others. The bill will be titled Enactment Article 3 of Chapter 9 of Title 10 of the OCGA, relating to revenue bonds for the G.O.L. Smith II Georgia World Congress Center, so as to increase the limit on indebtedness and for other purposes. House Bill 186 by Reverend Stevens, the 164th, and others. The bill will be titled Enactment, Article 4 of Chapter 7, Title 31 of the OCGA, relating to county and municipal hospital authorities so as to revise provisions relating to the sale or lease of a hospital by a hospital authority and for other purposes. Mr. President, that concludes the order.
Is there objection to engrossing 287, 221, and 186? There's objection. Would the majority leader like to speak? Would the minority leader like to speak? They both waive. The majority leader has moved that House Bill 287, House Bill 221, House Bill 186 be engrossed. All those in favor of the motion will vote yea. Opposed, nay. The Secretary will unlock the machine. On the motion to engross, the yeas are 35, the nays are 19. The motions have prevailed, and House Bill 287, House Bill 221, House Bill 186 are engrossed. We are now moving on to the rules calendar. We are now moving on to the rules calendar. Will the Secretary read the caption of House Bill 512?
House Bill 512 by Representative Watson, the 172nd, and others. The bill will be titled Enactment in Chapter 8 of Title 2 of the OCGA, relating to agricultural commodities promotion so as to provide for an agricultural commodity commission for propane or violations of marketing orders, provide for civil penalties and injunctive relief, to authorize promulgation of regulations, and for other purposes. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Agriculture and Consumer Affairs offers the following substitute to House Bill 512. A bill will be titled Enactment in Chapter 8 of Title 2 of the OCGA, relating to agricultural commodities promotion so as to provide for an agricultural commodity commission for propane, to provide for definition, to provide for composition and powers in terms of office of the commission, to provide for representation of the commission by the Attorney General of Georgia, to provide for funds to be held in trust, and for other purposes. Mr. President, that concludes the order.
Chair would like to recognize a senator from the 20th to speak to House Bill 512.
Good morning, colleagues. I bring to you today House Bill 512. This bill is to allow the Georgia propane dealers to establish a agriculture commodity commission. We have 12 similar commissions in Georgia, one of the most prominent being the Peanut Commission, and this legislation is modeled after the Peanut Commission. This bill, if passed, would establish the Agricultural Commodity Commission for propane, and you would have 3 members appointed from the House and 3 members appointed from the Senate, and the commission would elect a 7th member of the commission. It allows them to do a marketing order, or what's also known as a check-off, where they would have a referendum of all the propane dealers in Georgia, and if it passed over 50% vote, then they would have they would assess themselves. The money would be used for consumer outreach programs, development of a digital campaign to inform the public about propane safety and technology. Would be state technical school programs they would support for workforce development. They would be able to expand the certified employee training program, and they would have some driver training and simulation programs. They would also be able to support disaster relief. The assessment, the maximum amount the assessment can be, would be 0.4 of 1 cent. They're talking about, though, proposing 2.5 cents 2.5% of a cent, which should raise about $500,000. So this basically is a measure to allow Georgia businesses, many of which are small businesses, many of which are the pillars of the community in rural Georgia, to basically help themselves promote and advance their business. I've got a constituent here today that's very interested in this bill. He's got a business in Cochran, Davis Propane. Mr. Mike Davis is here, and he does a lot in the community, and I appreciate him being here today. I hope you all will pass this bill unanimously. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to try to answer them. Otherwise, I'll yield the well.
Senator, you've done such a thorough job. You have no questions.
Thank you.
Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the bill? The question's on the adoption of the committee substitute. Is there objection to adoption of the committee substitute? Chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? Chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall the main question be now put? Are there any objections? The chair hears none. The main question is ordered. Shall this bill now pass by substitute? Questions on the passage of the bill by substitute. All those in favor of the bill will vote yea. Opposed, nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 54, the nays are 0. This bill having received the requisite constitutional majority is therefore passed by substitute. Ms. Secretary, can you read the caption of House Bill 31?
House Bill 31 by Representatives Ralston of the 7th and others. A bill to be titled, An Act to Make and Provide Appropriations for the State Fiscal Year beginning July 1st, 2019 and ending June 30th, 2020 and for other purposes. Mr. President, Senate Appropriations Committee offers the following substitute to House Bill 31. A bill be titled, An Act to Make and Provide Appropriations for the State Fiscal Year beginning July 1st, 2019 and ending June 30th, 2020 to make and provide such appropriations for the operation of the state government and its departments, boards, bureaus, commissions, institutions, and other agencies and for other purposes. Mr. President, that concludes the order.
I'd like to thank our Appropriations Chairman for all the hard work that he continues to put into this process and his entire staff. It is a year-round process, and y'all continue to do amazing work. Chair would like to recognize a senator from the 4th to speak to House Bill 31.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, members of the Senate. Let me take a second and tell you what all is on your desk. You've got a copy of the Senate version of the fiscal year 2020 budget, which I would tell you has a tremendous amount of information in it, starting with all the different sources of funds that are printed in the beginning of the budget. Secondly, you've got a handout that has a lot of good information in it as well. At the top of the handout, it tells you a little bit about the overall numbers that I'll mention, and then it has a section on the pay package on the inside of the first sheet. And then by item number, you can look up by section. Pretty much it follows through the entire budget, and you can use that to know what the Senate position is on separate items all through the budget. Today I will identify a lot of items by budget, by number, and you can follow through by looking in your budget, or you can just listen, or you can follow through on this as well. Let me just take 1 second, if you'll indulge me, and acknowledge the subcommittee chairs of the Appropriations Committee and the members of this committee who worked very hard to produce this budget. Our subcommittee chairs all have other duties, and many of them are standing committee chairs. And this job comes right in the middle of a very busy time, right during and before or right after crossover day. So it's a duty that they take seriously. I just want to thank the subcommittee chairs and all the members of Appropriations who attended the hearings and listened and helped us produce this report. Secondly, I'd like to recognize the work of the Senate Budget and Evaluation Office, Melody Debussy. If any of you have interacted with Melody and her staff, you know that we've got an incredible staff of very fine individuals who are extremely knowledgeable about state budget and are willing to help you get the information that you need. Melody, we thank you so much for your work. Thirdly, I'd like to express my appreciation to the Lieutenant Governor, to his staff, and to, as the president of this body, he provides the leadership and the guidance that we need to produce a document that represents the Senate's wishes, particularly Mike Dudgeon of his office, who's been very faithful and has attended every meeting and been an important participant in this process. And finally, to each of you who have expressed an interest in the FY 2020 budget, your request, and I have actually the book over here of requests underneath my desk here, in case it's something you want to look up, but we've taken your request seriously and tried the best that we could to address, at the very least, your top priority, and in many cases, more than that, given the fact that we must balance our budget, and we obviously don't have unlimited returns. And I will tell you this, I'll talk about the pay raise in just a second for teachers, but that's such a large item that any manipulation of that forward or backward involves a lot of money. And that's a kind of a fair warning that as we move through this process, huge amounts of money may be making shifts, which may have repercussions on our budget as well. The FY 2020 budget is based on a growth rate, a very conservative growth rate of 2.3%. It's a state funds growth rate, and it totals some $27.5 billion. This budget includes appropriations of $1.9 billion in motor fuel taxes and fees. Those of you who've been around a few years remember when the amount that we appropriated from motor fuel taxes was about $1 billion or less, so we've almost doubled the amount going to transportation around our state. And as you travel around the state and you see all the orange barrels, you know that's true. The amount that lottery provides for education has continued to grow. In this budget is $1.249 billion, which is slightly ahead of last year. And of course, all of those funds are dedicated to pre-K, the Hope Grants and Technical Colleges, and the Hope Scholarship in both our public and private colleges. There are many budget items throughout this budget as you look at the columns, and that's another thing that I like about our budget is that you can look in each area of the budget, you can look in each program and see where the governor's recommendation was, if there was one, what the House change was, and what the Senate change is. It's a very good way to measure and take a look at how it has moved through. And many reasons why the numbers change. Sometimes it has to do with philosophy, and sometimes it's later data that we use to update the numbers as well. As I said, there are many items that you'll see the same number all the way across that we agree, or we agree generally. It's just maybe dollars may be a little bit different, but because the Senate may have a new version of some items, I will tell you the vast majority of the budget is agreed upon by the House and the Senate and the governor, and that's a good thing. There also, one more thing before I start discussing specifics, there's also something called statewide changes, or those are items that you see generally throughout the budget. And they include things like, of course, the largest item this year is the teacher pay raise. So you will see for every area that has anything to do with education, you'll see an item on the teacher pay raise. Then secondly, you'll see an item in other departments on the merit-based pay raises that are included. Then there are others, including a change in the state health benefit plan from the amount of the employer's share has changed, and you'll see a statewide change in that as well. Under TRS, you'll see a change in the employer amount that we pay on the payroll from 20.90% of payroll to 21.14% of payroll for TRS retirement. The last thing in statewide changes includes the state self-insurance program from DOAS. You'll see the premium changes throughout the budget. Those cover things like property insurance, the state self-insurance program for property insurance, liability insurance, and workers' comp insurance. So you'll see a lot of those, and those are not ads that we're making. They're ads that are covered throughout the budget based on whatever that program is. I mentioned the teacher pay raise. That's the largest single item of new spending in the 2020 budget. The Senate's budget funds the full $3,000 raise for all certified teachers and other certified employees of the school system, including counselors and librarians, beginning in September. I never really checked to see exactly what the history, or the reason for the history, but historically that's when we have started teacher pay raises. Maybe it's got something to do with the start time for teachers and the contract time. I'm not sure. I meant to check that out and I just never did. But that's why we put it in September. But we're continue to have conversation with both the House and the governor's office on that pay package, and I'm satisfied that we will come up with a compromise that fully funds a pay raise for teachers in the $3,000 range this coming year. The way that we can guarantee the $3,000 raise in the Senate version is in our language. By starting in September, of course, the first year you would miss 2 months out of the fiscal year for the pay raise. But we put in the language of the budget that it will be annualized in the 2021 budget. So that is our commitment and our promise to fully fund the $3,000 pay raise in ongoing years. If I were to characterize the Senate's version of the FY 2020 budget, I would say that it is a conservative, progressive budget and meets many of the human needs of our state. The human needs of the elderly and children and others, along with meeting our constitutional responsibility for education and public safety. There are a number of areas in behavioral health where the Senate agreed with the House and the governor to make marked improvements in services. In items 58.4, 5, and 6, there's a total of about $18.4 million appropriated for 8 additional forensic coordinator positions, 1 forensic integration home, and 5 additional forensic evaluator positions, all in behavioral health. Additionally, starting with item 59.6, there's some $39.2 million appropriated for such services as annualizing the cost of behavioral health crisis centers, crisis bed capacity, and for mental health consumers to comply with the Department of Justice settlement agreement. In item 59.12, the Senate has agreed with the House and added $500,000 to provide matching funds for a public-private partnership to provide behavioral health services in permanent homeless supported housing. And in item 63.4, the Senate agreed with the governor and the House and added $1.5 million to annualize the cost of supported employment and education services for 500 young adults. We've appropriated $25,000 each to food pantries in Clayton and Gwinnett counties. And in item 88.5, the Senate added $513,000 to treat and serve medically fragile children in the Champions for Children program. Several of you have written in support of the Mercy Clinic here in Atlanta. The Senate has added $350,000 for the clinic to provide mental and primary health care to indigent Georgians. Several of you wrote letters in support of the Mercy Clinic. In rural medical care, we funded a matching grant program for hospitals in counties of less than 35,000 population for CMS mandated upgrades to emergency rooms. This has to do with the care of mental patients, and you have to have your rooms set up in a certain safe manner, or else they're forced to have a person stay right close by that mental patient. So these updates will reset up the emergency rooms so that they'll meet the CMS mandate. The Senate also agreed with the House and added $500,000 for loan repayment awards for rural advanced practice registered nurses, physician's assistants, and physicians. We continue to work on the shortage of physicians in the state and increase the number of residency slots to work to keep more trained doctors in Georgia. Statistics tell us that as we increase the number of doctors being trained in Georgia, we can still lose them through the residency programs if we don't provide enough residency programs for them to serve their residency here in the state. That, according to the information that we have, is the decision point for many physicians, is where they do their residency. And so we are continuing under a program to increase the number of residency slots in the state. In this budget, we agreed with the House in total about $34.2 million going to 139 new residency slots in primary care, a second year of gynecological oncology fellowship at Augusta U, 54 OBGYN slots, a rural surgery initiative at Augusta U, child and adolescent psychiatry slots, and the Senate half for a startup grant for South Georgia Medical Center residency program. In Medicaid, there are two large items demonstrating the state's continuing commitment to that population. Under Medicaid, the aged, blind, and disabled population drew down a total of about $94 million in new state and federal funds. The Senate agreed with the governor and added $68.3 million in state funds to fill in the gap caused by a reduction in the matching rate of federal Medicaid runs. That's what we refer to as the FMAP rate. And it adds also $27.3 million in state funds to fill the shortfall caused by the reduction in the FMAP rate for peach care as well. The Senate also matched the House and raised the personal needs allowance of nursing home residents to $20 a month, an issue that many of you have been interested in. In item 92.1, low-income category of Medicaid, the Senate agreed with the governor and added $242.9 million in total state and federal funds. That's a 2-to-1 match for an increase in the projected cost of low-income Medicaid population. In 98.1, the Senate agreed with the House and added $500,000 for a Center of Excellence on Maternal Mortality at Morehouse School of Medicine to advance maternal health in Georgia. In item 105.6, in community supervision, the Senate agreed with the governor and funded $1 million for 20 new positions to expand the Georgia Prisoner Reentry Initiative to 10 new locations. In item number 123.4, a Senate initiative adds $1 million for child care and parent services to provide assistance to low-income families for the cost of child care. In items 242.4 through 242.9, in public health, the House and the Senate both addressed maternal health issues and other public health issues, appropriating $2.3 million for maternal health screening, the Maternal Mortality Review Committee, a nurse peer assistance program, sickle cell research, and feminine products for low-income girls and women. In education funding, the Senate added $1 million in item 144.6 for professional development grants for teachers instructing computer science courses, and $100,000 for a 2-year pilot to evaluate the effectiveness of early reading assistance for at-risk students with dyslexia. In item 157.7, the Senate adds $1 million for additional high school counselors for Title I schools. And I see the senator who suggested that is in conversation, and I can't get her attention, but that's of particular interest to some senators. In item 157.7, the Senate has added $1 million for additional high school counselors and council programs at Title I schools. In item 175.3, the Senate has added funding and language for $1.2 million for 11 positions and associated equipment for school safety positions for the implementation of Senate Bill 15. Item 135.9, in the Department of Economic Development, the Senate has added $300,000 to reinstate the local Welcome Center program to encourage local communities to promote tourism. The census is coming, and the Senate has moved to start the process of working to count those who are traditionally difficult to count. In item 173.7, there's $1 million in the Senate budget for the State Complete Count Committee for a targeted statewide campaign for hard-to-count areas. In the GBI, the Senate has added $563,000 for 5 scientists and 1 lab technician for the chemistry division to address the backlog. The Senate also agreed with the governor and added $1.3 million to 11 positions to bring the GBI unit of the Cyber Crime Center up to full operating capacity. In item 213.7, the Senate agreed with the governor and the House to add $500,000 for 1 prosecutor liaison and 2 senior investigators to implement a GBI gang task force, one of the priorities of the governor. Under Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, the Senate agreed with the House and added $2.1 million for accountability courts expansion. It's been very successful statewide. In the Department of Law, in item 225.7, the Senate added 4 positions and $201,000 to create a human trafficking unit starting January the 1st. Under Department of Natural Resources, the Senate has appropriated $300,000 for a regional nature educational facility on the Chattahoochee River in Cobb County. In item 231.4, the Georgia Heritage Grant Program has been minimally funded since the recession. The Senate has added $200,000 to build this grant program back up, which helps local communities continue to restore and protect historic buildings and properties that are already on the National Register of Historic Places. In the Department of Transportation, item 341.6, the Senate added $1,055,000 for airport aid. Many of you are active supporters of CASA, the Court-Appointed Special Advocates for Children in Foster Care. In item 185.12, the Senate has agreed with the House and increased funding for CASA by $250,000. And for our elderly, in item 189.5, the Senate has agreed with the governor and the House to fund $1.4 million for home-delivered meals under the Meals on Wheels program. As you remember, we added an amount in the amended budget to increase that program, and I mentioned then that we would have an appropriation in the general budget. That's $1.4 million for Meals on Wheels. Item number 188.4 includes funding of $1.3 million for 17 adult protective caseworkers in the Department of Human Services. The legislature has long been a supporter, a great supporter, I would say, of our public libraries. Item number 283.5 increases the amount for books and materials by $544,000 to increase the per capita funding level to 35 cents per capita. You will see in the section of the budget under the Georgia Student Finance Commission entries affecting the various lottery-funded scholarship programs. I bring this up because we had a discussion, as you remember, and amended about what the numbers meant up or down in the Student Finance section about the Hope Scholarship. So part of the Student Finance Commission's job is to look at trends for these various scholarship programs, the Zell Miller Scholarship, the private college Hope Scholarship, the Hope Scholarship, the Hope Grant. Part of their job is to look into, make a prediction for the amount of funds that will be needed to fund those programs for this coming year. Those amounts that you see up or down in this budget are their prediction of how those programs what the program will need in the way of funding. When the amended budget comes out, they will true up those numbers again when they see what the actual enrollment was, what the actual drawdown was, what the actual draw for the Hope Scholarship, for all of those areas. We'll true those numbers up in the amended budget next year. That is certainly not, that's probably more than you wanted to know, but that's the coverage that I was planning on sharing with you on the 2020 budget. Let me take a second and talk about the bond package, and I'll give you some numbers on that as well. The FY 2020 bond package totals $1.149 billion and is 4.2% of revenues following our debt management plan. If you've never taken a look at our debt management plan, I will tell you the state has a very involved debt management plan where we project out over the next 5 or 6 years the amount of our expenditures, the budget growth, revenue growth, and the amount of bonds that we expect to issue. This is something that the bond underwriters take a close look at every year, and we have been very faithful and methodical about following this debt management plan. It's just part of the way that we have operated this state over the many years that we've been successful at keeping the AAA bond rating. In this budget and bond package, there's $267 million in K-12 capital outlay bonds. And then in addition to that, there's about a little over $10 million in equipment for K-12 schools around the state. Schools earn, as you know, capital outlay dollars. There's a formula that's set up that they draw down over the years, and what we do every year is project how much they will be needed for this coming year for K-12 capital outlay. Georgia has probably the best capital outlay program in the United States and does an awful lot to help support local schools. Also, there's $20 million in school bus bonds, where we have over the years begun to help schools buy school bus bonds to buy school buses. Also, there's 1.7 added by the House, 1.7 million added by the House for alternative energy buses. So between the two, there's almost $22 million in school bus bonds. In Regents, the Senate budget totals about $249 million in capital outlay for the Board of Regents institutions. I would say that probably more than half of that is in small cap projects that are renovations or building expansions that are on existing buildings and not are in new buildings as well. Technical colleges bond package totals $123.9 million, and the public libraries package for the Senate totals $2.335 million. There are also categories under libraries in bonds of technology, repurposing grants, and MR&R grants. Some of you who had projects for local libraries you wrote us about, we are going to be funding through one of these other programs, through one of these other programs like the MR&R or repurposing grants. Other agencies throughout state government have bonds for them, including the GBI, Public Safety, Corrections, Agriculture, and Natural Resources. There are others, including bonds for forestry, or in Georgia Environmental Facilities Authority, bonds for water and loan programs, World Congress Center, the Stone Mountain Authority, and of course the Secretary of State and the $150 million in voting machine bonds. There's also a rail package of about $9.9 million in bonds that are dedicated to state-owned short-line railroads around the state that help in local economic development. Mr. President, that concludes my presentation. This time I'd be happy to entertain any questions that the members might have.
Thanks, Senator, for your hard work on this. Chair recognizes the senator from the 15th for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Yield.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I certainly thank you for always having such a great work outcome. We appreciate your efforts as always. Can you share with me the cuts, or is that a cut, 905 for the Casita Chattahoochee Library? Was that an amount, and that was 135 less than anticipated. Can you clear that up for me?
What's the bond number?
Actually, this was some communication from my director in Chattahoochee County, who said that we were like 135,000 less than planned for 2020.
There are a number of projects that the House added that we had no Senate sponsor for. So they're half funded and they're in conference, and we'll be deciding in conference. We added some projects that the House didn't have any funds in there for. We added half of it. Probably that may be one of them. I'll have to look it up. It's obviously half of the cost, and they're concerned about it. But in conference, we're going to settle these. What we hope we can do is find the revenue to fund their projects and fund ours as well. But the projects that we added of course, we're second in line. There was no chance for the House to match ours. But we put half in of all these projects. That way we could do more projects that way. We're hopeful that in conference we can settle it. But there's the chance that some of them won't make it, obviously. But our hope is that we can fund both the House and the Senate half projects that the President is about $17 million between the two.
Thank you once again for your hard work.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate the answer.
I think the one you're referring to is we funded half, and we'll have to try to get the other half. So I would suggest you get somebody from your area to contact the House Chairman. Okay.
You have no more questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I urge your adoption of House Bill 31, FY 2020 budget.
Thank you, sir. Chair recognizes the senator from the 41st to speak to the measure.
Mr. President, members of the Senate, I'm pleased and excited to come to you to say thank you. Thank you to Senator from the 4th for working with members of my party on this budget, making sure that our voices were at least heard. There's many things in this budget we may not be totally in sync with, that we might have disagreed with, but the Senator from the 4th did listen to members of the caucus and the Appropriations Committee, and the President of the Senate did listen to some of our concerns and interests in this budget. I want you to know we're excited that teachers in Georgia are starting to get a pay raise. And we're also glad that state employees have some attention to this budget. But we do want to highlight to you as we move forward with the next bill on the calendar that's another tax issue or other issues, that we have concerns that we need to make sure we stay focused on. For instance, state employees in this budget get a 2% raise. 2% is the cost of the rate of inflation. Over 20 years, the rate of inflation is more like 3.44%. So in many years, that wouldn't even keep up with the cost, but it's the rate of the inflation. So we're not really giving them a raise, we're just holding them equal. And it's not a merit increase, so every employee may not get it. Some departments see certain areas that are desperately in need of a raise and retain people, they may get a larger share, and some employees may be left out with nothing. I think us, as a deliberative body representing our constituents, need to make sure that we stayed focused, that state employees over the last decade especially have seen their wages and earnings reduced tremendously. And while we applaud and compliment and appreciate the 2% that's in there, I just wanted to come down and remind each of you that this is a priority that we should keep our eye on, because we're not making up for the lost revenues that happened during the Great Recession and beyond, and we're not getting the employees up to where they really need to be competitive with the private marketplace, and we're losing a lot of good employees. But I do think that we have a lot of good things in this budget, and I want to applaud that we are trying to address the demands of teachers and others and some other critical needs of our state with people, for instance, in certain educational areas that we've also supplemented the general budget. So I do support the budget and appreciate the chairman for listening to mine and other concerns. Thank you, Mr. President.
Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the bill? The question is now on the adoption of the committee substitute. Is there objection to adoption of the committee substitute? The chair hears none, and the committee substitute is adopted. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall the main question be now put? Are there any objections? The chair hears none. The main question is ordered. Shall this bill now pass by substitute? The question is on the passage of the bill by substitute. All those in favor of the bill will vote yea. Opposed, nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 55, the nays are 0. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed by substitute. For what purpose does the senator from the 4th rise?
Mr. President, I move the Senate immediately transmit HB 31 to the House.
Senator from the 4th has moved that the Senate immediately transmit House Bill 31 to the House. Is there objection? Hearing no objection, House Bill 31 is immediately transmitted. Mr. Secretary, will you read the caption of House Bill 287?
House Bill 287 by Representative Dubnick of the 29th and others, a bill to be titled and act to amend Article 2 of Chapter 7 and Title 48 of the OCGA, relating to imposition, rate, computation, exemptions from income taxes so as to delete an income tax deduction for certain physicians serving as community-based faculty physicians, to create a new income tax credit for taxpayers who are licensed physicians, advanced practice registered nurses, or physician assistants who provide uncompensated preceptorship training to medical students, advanced practice registered nurse students, or physician assistant students for certain periods of time and for other purposes. Mr. President, that concludes the order.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 52nd to speak to House Bill 287.
Thank you, Mr. President. This bill has been passed before in a little bit different form and got caught up last year, but this is changing a deduction to a credit for preceptor training for physicians, for physician assistants, and for advanced practice nurses. The impetus for this, and in full disclosure, I'm an adjunct professor with Emory. I teach anesthesia students. I teach 3rd and 4th year medical students from Augusta in the operating room certain skills, and I have internal medicine residents in there. I don't get paid anything. I don't plan on getting paid anything. I think I should do that. However, not everybody feels that way, and we're having a hard time getting the slots because it does slow people down and cost them money to do this. And so we're not getting the slots to keep them in the state. And you heard the chairman of appropriations talking about how we're trying to get people to train here and keep them in the state. So the foreign medical schools have been actually paying to do this. If we did that, it would cost 3 times what this bill is going to cost, and it would maybe even lead to a bidding war or whatever. So what we have done is offered a tax credit, and you get one for each 160 hours of training that you do to help train up our physicians, physician assistants, and advanced practice nurses. This will help have the slots in the state we need. And you see a fiscal note that was not originally in there. And when I saw that, I immediately thought about the senator from the 48th. And I said, I don't know how this got left out of the packet, but it was put on the floor for everybody to see that. That's the short answer. And also, I will add that if you are getting paid anything to train these students, you are not eligible for this credit. So I think that's going to help out on potential bidding war and that kind of thing too. But I do think it's important for keeping our students trained here in Georgia and having enough slots to train them. You know, our PAs in particular, half their training is in the field, very similar. Not a physician and don't know the exact ratio, but a lot of their training is out there in the field too. With that, if there's not any questions, I'll yield the well.
You have questions, Senator. Chair recognizes the senator from the 18th for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Does the senator yield?
I yield.
Senator, I just want to thank you for your work on this bill. I think this is an excellent piece of legislation, and I think you've explained very well the gap that we need to fill and make sure that physicians that are using their knowledge and experience and can hand that off to the medical students coming behind them can do so effectively, and that they're incented to do that. I appreciate your work on this, and I know the state and this legislature and this body has done a lot in the last few years to try to increase the number of medical students and doctors that we have in Georgia, and I think this is a key part of that, and I appreciate your work on the bill.
I thank the senator for the comments, and you're right, we're doing a lot. And 10 years ago at the hospital I'm at now, those 3 different groups I talked about being trained there, none of them were being trained there. And I think we've realized in the state we have to provide the training, for one, to train them because they might be taking care of me someday, and number 2, that we want them training here in Georgia, and the statistics say they will more likely stay in Georgia with that training.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 45th for a question.
Mr. Chairman, would you please yield?
I'll yield.
Would you not state that this is one of the tools in the toolbox that the state of Georgia needs to increase the access to medical care?
It is not the answer for everything. The residency slots we're increasing in the budget is not the answer for everything, but we have done a lot of things from, as you know, direct primary care, Medicaid waivers, different things to try to increase access to care, and this will certainly be one piece of that, and I believe it will be effective for a lot less cost than doing what the foreign medical schools are doing.
Would you further yield?
I'll yield.
Is it not true, and I think you illustrated this a little bit, but maybe if you could explain more, that if a student has a professional relationship with a preceptor, that student is more apt to stay in the region or in the state, that preceptor where they're learning, is that not true? Could you just illustrate that a little bit more about preceptorships?
That is absolutely true, and I'll tell you, every one of the anesthesia PAs that we have been able to retain at our hospital were trained at that Rome hospital. It holds across the state that if they're exposed to it there versus an unknown that they didn't get to see, then they're more likely to stay there, and that's what we're trying to do in the state of Georgia.
Do you continue to yield?
I'll yield.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 46th for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the senator yield?
I'll yield.
Let's just make clear of a couple of points on these. We currently give tax deductions for these preceptorships, and this is now advancing that to a tax credit, which probably triple the
Is
cost.
a higher cost, absolutely, depending on their tax bracket.
And just to be clear, nobody's misled. These are not residents that are doing residency programs here, which we have identified as people that are more likely to stay. These are undergraduate medical school students.
I would agree with that, but now they're not undergraduate in that they've already finished a 4-year program in college, but they are in, you know, what some people would call a mid-level program, the PAs and the APRNs. And in addition to that, the 3rd and 4th year medical students, such as I mentioned, that train at our hospital from Augusta, those are all in that category. But the same holds true with the residency slots, is they're more likely to stay here if we can train them here.
Okay. Well, do you have any problem? So I got University of Georgia Law School in Georgia, and I have law clerks.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, they're essentially very low-paid interns like these students would be to you. Do you got a problem with us, anybody training kids in any other profession to get tax credits for our time?
I appreciate the concerns there. These are no-paid students, in this case, not low-paid. But I think particularly with the problems we have in healthcare in the state, having an adequate supply of health care providers, it's critical. And I think if the same need was shown for the law practice or others, I would certainly support that being looked at.
So you're getting paid tax credits for supervising free interns in your profession?
They're correct. They would be getting paid. And as I said, I haven't participated and won't participate in this, but the reality is the slots aren't there. It does cost them money. It slows them down, the health care providers that do it. And in addition, we're not having slots from some of the foreign medical schools that are trying to, we're trying to stay out of a bidding war, which I think would increase the cost of that. And so we feel like that, this credit for 160 hours of training is a pretty minimal payment method, certainly nowhere even close to half of minimum wage.
Thank you, Senator.
Does the senator continue to yield?
I can yield, and I think maybe let them make their points, because I know we've got a lot of bills today. So I'll yield the well.
Senator has yielded the well. Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the bill? Chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall the main question be now put? Are there any objections? The chair hears none. The main question is ordered. Shall this bill now pass? The questions on the passage of the bill. All those in favor will vote yea. Opposed, nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 41, the nays are 9. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. All right, I'll give a quick update on the game plan. We've got 10 bills left on the calendar. It's approaching lunchtime, but we've got a lot of important committee meetings that we've got to get to this afternoon. And so we're going to push through and try to get through the remaining 10 appropriately sped and deliberated, but I think it's important for us to get to these committee meetings today. So if you've got extra Girl Scout cookies in your desk or need to borrow a protein bar, let me know. Mr. Secretary, can you read the caption of House Bill 483?
House Bill 483 by Representative Stevens, 164th, and others. A bill will be titled enactment Chapter 13 of Title 16 of the OCGA relating to controlled substances, so as to change certain provisions relating to Schedules 1, 4, and 5's controlled substances, to change certain provisions relating to the definition of dangerous drug, to provide for related matters and for other purposes. Mr. President, that concludes the order.
Chair would like to recognize the senator from the 11th to speak to House Bill 483.
Thank you, Mr. President. House Bill 483 is the annual update we pass every year that updates the dangerous drug roster from the Drugs and Narcotic Agency. Nothing's been added. I'd appreciate your support. I yield the well.
Any other senator wish to speak for or against the bill? Chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall the main question be now put? Are there any objections? The chair hears none. The main question is ordered. Shall this bill now pass? The questions on the passage of the bill. All those in favor will vote yea. Opposed, nay. Secretary will unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 48, the nays are 1. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Ms. Secretary, please read the caption to Senate Resolution 24.
Senate Resolution 24 by Senator Beach of the 21st and others, a resolution urging the United States Congress to amend the allocation of funds collected through federal motor fuel taxes and for other purposes. Mr. President, that concludes the order.
Chair recognizes the Senator from the 21st to speak to Senate Resolution 24.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I bring before you Senate Resolution 24. This is an urging resolution to Congress to amend the allocation of funds collected through our federal motor fuel tax. Right now, every time you pump a gallon of gas, 18.4 cents goes to Washington. What this resolution does is ask Washington to block grant 10 cents back with no federal strings attached to it. And it could only be used on capital construction, no administration or operations. Right now, when we take federal dollars, there are 22 different steps we may have to jump through to use our money. It's our money. I want to tell you a quick story about West Side Parkway. It's a parallel road to 400. We tried to build that. It was 11 years ago. Congressman Isaacson got us a federal grant. We didn't have money to build it. It was $16 million. We got $4.5 million in federal money. There was a little creek that wasn't as wide as this rostrum right here, and they found an endangered species. It took 7 years to study that. Consequently, the project went from $16 million to $25 million, $9 million more. We'd have been better off not to use that money, and it took 11 years. To put that in perspective, when Eisenhower built the interstate system, we built 46,000 miles of interstate between 1956 and 1970 in 14 years. We have got to stop the red tape and the bureaucracy, and that's all I'm doing here is urging US DOT to block that money back with no strings attached so we can get some roads built. We proved when a bridge collapsed that we could build a bridge in 6 weeks when Washington, D.C. got out of the way. So I urge your support of this and ask Congress to let us have our money back to build roads and bridges and get ourselves out of congestion. I would appreciate your support. Thank you very much.
Senator has yielded the well. Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the resolution? Chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the adoption of the resolution? Chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall the main question be now put? Are there any objections? The chair hears none. The main question is ordered. Shall this resolution be adopted? Questions on the adoption of the resolution. All those in favor will vote yea. Opposed, nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. For what purpose does the senator from the 51st rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Isn't it true I had my button on to ask the senator from the 21st that if he were to get elected in Congress, was that going to be one of his priorities when he gets up to D.C.?
I'm certain the gentleman knows his button was pushed, and it's up to each and every member to decide if that was a great question or not. For what purpose does the senator from the 49th rise?
Parliamentary inquiry, Mr.
State
President.
your inquiry.
Isn't it true that all the members of this august body appreciate the senator from the 21st being direct on his delivery?
I'm certain the gentleman knows of what he speaks. On the adoption of the resolution, the yeas are 47, the nays are 2. The resolution, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore adopted. Ms. Secretary, please read the caption of House Bill 25.
House Bill 25 by Representative Belton of the 112th and others, a bill we title enactment of Article 5 of Chapter 4 of Title 10 and Chapter 1 of Title 13 of the OCGA, relating to self-storage facilities and general provisions regarding contracts, respectively, so as to provide military service members civil relief concerning certain contractual obligations due to circumstances of active duty and for other purposes. Mr. President, Senate Committee on Veterans, Military, and Homeland Security offers the following substitute to House Bill 25, a bill we title enactment Article 5 of Chapter 4 of Title 10 and Chapter 1 of Title 13 of the OCGA relating to self-storage facilities and general provisions regarding contracts, respectively, so as to provide military service members civil relief concerning certain contractual obligations due to circumstances of active duty to update a cross-reference provide for definitions to enhance service member consumer protections under the law to include certain television, video, and audio programming services, internet access services, and health spa services, and for other purposes. Mr. President, that concludes the order.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 14th to speak to House Bill 25.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is a very simple bill. It's a Civil Relief Act. Currently, right now, this is coming from the Pentagon. They want to extend what's already in place to be able to terminate contracts for those that have been deployed, including television and some of the other contracts. With no questions, I'll yield the well and ask for your favorable consideration.
You have no questions. Any other senator wish to speak to or against the bill? The question's on the adoption of the committee substitute. Is there objection to adoption of the committee substitute? Chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? Chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall the main question be now put? Are there any objections? Chair hears none. The main question is ordered. Shall this bill now pass by substitute? Questions on the passage of the bill by substitute. All those in favor vote yea. Opposed, nay. The Secretary will unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 49, the nays are 0. This bill having received the requisite constitutional majority is therefore passed by substitute. Mr. Secretary, can you read the caption of House Bill 63?
House Bill 63 by Representative Cooper of the 43rd and others. The bill will be titled enacted in Chapter 24 of Title 33 of the OCGA relating to insurance generally, so as to require health benefit plans to establish step therapy protocols to provide for a step therapy exception process and for other purposes. Mr. President, Senate Committee on Insurance and Labor offers the following substitute to House Bill 63. The bill will be titled enactment in Chapter 24 of Title 33 of the OCGA relating to insurance generally, so as to require health benefit plans to establish step therapy protocols, provide for a step therapy exception process, and for other purposes. Mr. President, that concludes the order.
Chair would like to recognize the senator from the 32nd to speak to House Bill 63.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the Senate, I bring you House Bill 63, the Step Therapy Bill. The bill strengthens the doctor-patient relationship by restoring some control of step therapy protocols. Step therapy protocols are put in place by health plans to control costs and require that certain drugs be tried first in sequence, regardless of what the physician prescribes. For example, as an orthopedic surgeon, I may want to give a patient Celebrex, but a step protocol might require the patient to fail with 2 less expensive drugs first, even if they have problems tolerating anti-inflammatory medications. This could result in side effects or complications from the drugs. This bill puts exceptions in place, including the drug will cause harm to the patient. The drug is expected to be ineffective based on the individual patient. The patient has already failed on a drug in the same class, and the patient tried the drug on their previous plan and failed. The bill clearly states that samples don't constitute a trial. It sets a time frame for the appeal process, and it will not prevent a plan from requiring a patient to try a generic drug or biologic equivalent. It takes effect January 1st, 2020. This bill's been thoroughly discussed, represents a compromise that will help many individual patients. I'm happy to answer questions, and if there are no questions, I'll yield the well.
You have no questions. Any of the senator wish to speak for or against the bill? The question is on the adoption of the committee substitute. Is there objection to adoption of the committee substitute? Chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? Chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall the main question be now put? Are there any objections? The chair hears none. Main question is ordered. Shall this bill now pass by substitute? Questions on the passage of the bill by substitute. All those in favor will vote yea. Opposed, nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 49, the nays are 0. This bill having received the requisite constitutional majority is therefore passed by substitute. Mr. Secretary, can you read the caption of House Bill 64?
House Bill 64 by Representative Prince of the 127th and others. The bill will be titled enacted in Article 1 of Chapter 7, Title 19 of the OCGA, relating to parent and child relationship general provisions, so as required child welfare agencies to make efforts to determine whether a parent or guardian of a child who is the subject of abuse allegations is on active duty in the military, to require certain notifications to military installation family advocacy programs, to provide for the reporting of child abuse to military law enforcement in certain situations and for other purposes. Mr. President, that concludes the order.
Chair would like to recognize the senator from the 42nd to speak to House Bill 64.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I'm so proud to present HB 64 to you all today. There was a committee that many representatives in the House looked at on how to support military families in our state. And one of the issues that arose is addressed by HB 64. State laws currently do not require Child Protective Services to identify military families in cases of child abuse and neglect, or to report them to the appropriate military authorities. So that means that if local law enforcement finds out about something related to child abuse, they're really hamstrung in dealing with the issue because the individuals reside on base and are actually subject to military law enforcement. So when we change this state law, we support both local government and military departments assisting in making sure that in cases of child abuse, the right information goes to the right departments, and we can assist these children and families. So, Mr. President, I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any, and if not, I would ask for your favorable consideration of HB 64, a step forward for our military kids.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 29th for a question.
Thank you, Senator. Do you yield?
Of course, to my new friend.
Is it true that these relationships are already established between local law enforcement and the Provost Marshal's office on those bases?
Absolutely, Senator. Of course, you would know better than I as a former law enforcement from an area where there's a lot of where there's a large military base, but thank you for the question.
You have no more questions.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask for your favorable consideration.
Any other senators wish to speak for or against the bill? Chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there objection or agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? Chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall the main question be now put? Are there any objections? Chair hears none. The main question is ordered. Shall this bill now pass? Questions on the passage of the bill. All those in favor will vote yea. Opposed, nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 51, the nays are 0. This bill having received the requisite constitutional majority is therefore passed. Mr. Secretary, can you read the caption of House Bill 130?
House Bill 130 by Representative Nix of the 69th and others, a bill will be titled enactment Article 1 of Chapter 2 of Title 20 of the OCGA relating to the State Board of Education so as to authorize the Georgia Foundation for Public Education to establish a nonprofit corporation to qualify as a public foundation to provide for conditions and for other purposes. Mr. President, that concludes the order.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 8th to speak to House Bill 130.
Thank you, Mr. President. House Bill 130 provides or creates a foundation to solicit and receive benefits, be cash or assets, for the benefit of public education. When people are doing the state planning, they're usually going to provide for things that's near and dear to them, and there's a lot of people out there that have a real passion for the education, and this will provide a tool to handle that. Any questions? Entertain them. Otherwise, I ask for your favorable consideration.
You have no questions. Any other senator wish to speak for or against the bill? Chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall the main question be now put? Are there any objections? The chair hears none. The main question is ordered. Shall this bill now pass? The question is on the passage of the bill. All those in favor will vote yea. Opposed, nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 52, the nays are 0. This bill having received the requisite constitutional majority is therefore passed. Mr. Secretary, can you read the caption of House Bill 217?
House Bill 217 by Representative Gaines of the 117th and others, a bill will be titled enactment Code Section 161332 of the OCGA relating to transactions and drug-related objects so as to provide that employees and agents of syringe services programs are not subject to certain offenses relating to hypodermic syringes and needles, to authorize the Department of Public Health to promulgate rules and regulations, and for other purposes. Mr. President, that concludes the order.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 32nd to speak to House Bill 217.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm bringing you a bipartisan bill that addresses an important public health epidemic of HIV and hepatitis C due to IV drug use. Georgia is now third among all the states for new HIV diagnoses and has also seen an increase in hepatitis C cases since 2016. This epidemic tracks the opioid problem we've been working on for several years. Both these diseases are not only life-threatening but can also be transmitted to infants. Many of the worst counties in the country for this are in Georgia, 4 in the metro area and 4 in rural Georgia. The cost of treating these diseases for an individual patient is hundreds of thousands of dollars, much of which comes back to the state. This bill provides for a syringe services program in Georgia to exchange clean needles for contaminated ones in a center. These are non-governmental programs, but they're going to be regulated by the Department of Public Health. There's no fiscal note, as the programs would not be operated by the state. These programs must include wraparound services, including education, screening, and referral to treatment for their substance abuse disorder. The Department of Health and Human Services with the Trump administration is in support of these programs, which are already in place in 33 states, including Indiana, where VP Pence signed a similar bill into law in 2015 when he was governor. A side benefit of this program is reduction of overdoses and protection of law enforcement and first responders. These programs are evidence-based and have shown not only reductions in new HIV and hepatitis C cases, but also individuals in these programs are 5 times more likely to enter into treatment programs, according to the CDC. This bill overwhelmingly passed the House with bipartisan support. Although getting control of this epidemic is going to need more than one solution, this is a fiscally conservative step towards improving the public health of our state, and I would ask for your favorable consideration. I'd be happy to answer questions, and if there are none, I'll yield the will.
You have no questions.
Thank you.
Any other senator wish to speak for or against the bill? Chair hears none, and the previous question is ordered. Is there objection or agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? Chair hears none, and the report of the committee is agreed to. Shall the main question be now put? Are there any objections? The chair hears none, and the main question is ordered. Shall this bill now pass? The question's on the passage of the bill. All those in favor will vote yea. Opposed, nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 45, the nays are 4. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Mr. Secretary, can you please read the caption of House Bill 221?
House Bill 221 by Representative Rogers of the 10th and others, the bill will be titled Act Amendment Article 3 of Chapter 9 of Title 10 of the OCGA, relating to revenue bonds for the GOL Smith II Georgia World Congress Center so as to increase the limit on indebtedness and for other purposes. Mr. President, that concludes the order.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 19th to speak to House Bill 221.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the Senate, this is a very simple bill. It really only changes one word on line 15. As you know, our Georgia World Congress Center has been very successful recently in updating many of the things that go on at the World Congress Center, bringing more attractions to our state, more visitors to our state who spend more of their tax money, sales tax money in our state and drive up our sales tax revenues. This allows the Georgia World Congress Center, because of increases in construction costs, to raise their bonding capacity from $400 million to $500 million. Mr. President, if there are no questions, I'll yield the will.
You have a question, Senator. Chair recognizes the senator from the 48th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Does the senator yield?
Yes, ma'am.
I wanted to ask about the increasing construction costs that you mentioned. How much is that contract or contracts? How much are we over budget?
There is not a contract at this point in time.
There's not?
No, ma'am. This is just in a preparation for setting something out to bid. As you know, we've built a new stadium in that area. We've also built a new multimodal transportation facility, a bus facility, and there's a idea or thoughts of possibly doing something with a hotel establishment there. And so this is to put that capacity up. It's something we did 2 years ago that we went to $400 million, but we have seen increases in prices. As you know, the economy's done fairly well over the past few years.
Thank you, sir. So do you yield further?
Yes, ma'am.
So just to clarify, you're just anticipating that you're going to need this additional money. It's not that we've had any overruns of any contracts.
Correct.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President. If there are no more questions, I'll yield the will.
There is one question remaining. Chair recognizes the senator from the 14th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Yield.
I do.
Senator, this hotel that's proposed wouldn't in any way be a destination or plan on having a casino in it, would it?
I've not seen any plans for the basement, but I would imagine that since our General Assembly has not passed such legislation, that there is no way that such would be allowed.
Thank you, Senator.
Mr.
With
President,
that,
there are
no more questions.
And I'm relieved. I yield the well.
Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the bill? Chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? Chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall the main question be now put? Are there any objections? Chair hears none. The main question is ordered. Shall this bill now pass? The questions on the passage of the bill. All those in favor will vote yea. Opposed, nay. The Secretary will unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 44, the nays are 4. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Mr. Secretary, can you read the caption of House Bill 227?
House Bill 227 by Representatives Fry of the 118th and others. A bill will be titled Enactment Code Section 3364 of the OCGA relating to enumeration of unfair methods of competition and unfair or deceptive acts or practices regarding insurance so as to expand prohibitions on discrimination against victims of family violence to include victims of sexual assault and for other purposes. Amendment 1 by Senator Brass of the 28th and others offers the following amendment. Amend the substitute to House Bill 227 by inserting after assault and before 2 on line 4 the following. To amend Chapter 20C of Title 33 of the OCGA relating to accurate provider directories so to provide for the inclusion of listed providers as in-network during the term of the enrollee's contract year and for other purposes. Mr. President, that concludes the order.
Chair recognizes our great friend, well-dressed senator from the 28th to speak to House Bill 227. Is it run-in time yet? Not yet. Okay. He's going to take his time down to the well.
Thank you, Mr. President. HB 227 simple. Years ago, insurance companies could raise your rates or deny your coverage if you're a victim of domestic abuse or sexual assault. In 2000, we actually fixed that here in the legislature. But one thing we never fixed was on sexual assault outside of domestic abuse. This bill simply fixes that. And I would highly encourage your support. And I understand there's an amendment coming, which it's my amendment, so I knew it was coming. I'll speak to that real quick. The amendment simply, if you start out with your doctor in network, and that doctor goes out of network during the course of the year, you as the insured will continue to get that rate, that in-network rate throughout the remainder of the year. It's a good bill.
You have a couple questions.
Well, then I'll yield.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 46th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the senator yield?
Yes, sir, I sure will.
My question does not concern your amendment, but if I could direct you to page 4, lines 111, that subsection H. That seems to apply to something other than like health insurance benefits. It talks about exclusions or limitations on coverage. that restricts the ability of victims of family violence or sexual assault to be indemnified. I'm thinking in the context of liability coverage, it's very common that insurers will exclude coverage for intentional wrongdoing or intentional acts. They usually cover negligent acts or carelessness on the part of their insureds. I'm concerned about that, and I will be proposing an amendment to take that out, but if I'm incorrect in my analysis, please educate me quickly here, because it just seems that that's overbroad, more than just somebody's health insurance coverage, that we're now getting into liability coverage, and I would imagine the cost of obtaining coverage would skyrocket if you're refusing to exclude coverage for intentional sexual attacks. Do you know whether...
Was there a question in there?
Yeah, the question is, does this prevent a company from excluding intentional conduct?
Oh, well, it's my understanding that this bill is simply dealing with health insurance and the insured, not, I don't see where it would go into liability and all that, but.
All right, thank you.
You're a lawyer and may think otherwise.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 45th for a question.
Would the senator yield?
Of course.
Senator, I haven't had time to really analyze this, but it was my understanding that the underlying bill is about domestic violence and sexual assault. And speaking to your amendment, this broadens it dramatically, because you're talking about any health care contractual agreements in-network versus out-of-network. So first of all, my question is about germaneness, and I will ask for a ruling on that. But second of all, do you not feel like this is dramatically increasing the scope of what you're trying to accomplish, and it may harm the underlying bill?
Well, the underlying bill deals specifically with insurance coverage in sexual assault cases.
Right.
So, you know, obviously that'll be up to the germaneness will be up to the president of the Senate to make that ruling, and that'll be up to him. But simply what we're doing on the amendment was, it was actually part of another bill that that got tied up in committee, and with some other issues around it. And I felt like that was a good piece of legislation that really became really a casualty of war, so to speak. So we've taken out that language, and I thought this would be an appropriate place to put it. But obviously that'll be up to the big boss man.
Would you further yield?
I'll yield.
Would you not agree that this is a pretty dramatic expansion, because you're dealing with a single issue of maybe aggravated assault and domestic disputes, but then you're getting into medical diagnosis and contractual agreements between hospitals and insurance companies?
Right, but we're saying, basically we're saying that I think we're losing sight of the contract of the individual who is insured. They sign a contract too, and through the course of the year, their contracts are becoming null and void. And so we're simply coming in and saying that no, your contract will still be good through the end of the year. And and that, unfortunately, in these cases, our constituents and even us sometimes are losing a coverage that we were guaranteed at the beginning of the year, and then all of a sudden in the middle of the year we're being told that it's gone and you have to find a new doctor. And so we're simply trying to get back to putting the patient first.
Would you further yield?
Of course.
I agree with you, because it does protect the consumer. But what I'm concerned about, I mean, we pick up the newspaper, one of the major hospitals is having a conflict in their contractual agreement, and they can't reach an agreement, and it's dumping out these, not thousands of people, but a lot of people out of a contract. I'm worried about the contract negotiations. Are you saying that that would have to end at the end of that contract period, that they couldn't negotiate?
No, the negotiations will be ongoing. It's just the contract that was there at the beginning of the year remains throughout the course of the year. So, a perfect example in my district, we had, Piedmont has a very big footprint in my district. And 2 years ago, or maybe even last year, we had an issue where basically they weren't going to take Blue Cross Blue Shield, and this just simply says that they would take it throughout the course of the year. Or I'm sorry, at least the patients or the insured patients would get those rates throughout the course of the year, and then at the end of the year, then they would either have to go find a new provider.
Would you further yield one last question?
Sure.
When you were having the hearing on the other bill, did you have an estimation of how many patients in the state of Georgia would be affected by this?
I did not hear that number, no.
The senator continue to yield.
If I have questions, if not, I'll yield the well.
You have questions. Chair recognizes the senator from the 42nd.
Thank you, Mr. President. Does the senator yield?
Senator yields.
Thank you, Senator. I have a question about each amendment, if that's all right. With amendment number 1, it seems to me, is this trying to understand at a little higher level? It seems like it's geared toward consumer protection.
That's correct.
Okay. And with amendment number 2, perhaps the author, I could ask him the question in a minute, but it looks like it's striking all of section H, which is almost all existing law. So what is the ramification of striking all that section of existing law?
I'll have to let the author of Amendment 2 speak to that. I actually have not even seen the amendment yet.
All right, thank you.
You have no more questions.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 46th to speak to his amendment number 2, but Mr. Secretary, will you read the amendment first?
Amendment 2 by Senator Cowser to the 46th and others offers the following amendment. Amendment 2 to amend House Bill 227 by striking lines 111 through 114. That concludes the order.
Thank you, Mr. President. I bring this amendment because I think the bill goes further than just the application process, and I am getting my interpretation from the summary that's been prepared by the Senate Research Office that was considered in committee. I think we all agree that insurance companies should not deny or refuse somebody's application for insurance coverage, refuse to insure them, refuse to reissue coverage, to terminate their coverage, to charge them a different premium, etc., if they have been a victim of sexual assault. The part that I had a problem with is on the back page of it, section G, that also prevents an insurance company from excluding or limiting coverage for a loss for a claim arising out of a sexual assault. These are intentional actions when people commit a sexual assault, a sexual battery, a rape, etc. And ordinarily, insurance companies don't insure you, provide you liability coverage for doing a wrongful act intentionally. I can only imagine the rates would skyrocket if you were to require insurance companies to protect their insureds against intentionally harming women. So this almost encourages that conduct rather than deter it. If I'm reading this accurately, I'm basing my analysis on the Senate Research Office's review and summary of the bill, and that's why I think it's best that we leave intact the provisions of this bill that prevent insurance companies from discriminating against people in their applications or their premiums if they have at some point been a victim of a sexual assault, but not requiring insurance companies to protect these sexual predators or sexual offenders that harm people against personal liability by allowing them to insure against it. So for those reasons, I would encourage you to support Amendment 2, just taking out subsection G on the very last page, page 4 of this bill. Mr. President, I'm happy to answer any questions or yield the well.
You have several questions. The chair recognizes the senator from the 27th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Yield.
I yield.
I just want to get clarification. Section G, at least on the copy that I have here, is lines 106 through 110. Is that different from what you see?
I had lines 111 through 114. I don't have the bill in my hand. Hang
Okay.
on.
I just wanted clarification on that. Thank you.
I misstated it. You're right, Senator. Subsection H. I have the lines right. I just misspoken there when I said subsection G.
Thank you.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 23rd.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the speaker yield?
I'd be happy to.
The thing that I'm having trouble understanding, the law already has some limitation on exclusions dealing with victims of family violence. In light of that, why would it be a problem to clarify that to include sexual assault? Both are intentional acts, family violence and sexual assault. Can you help me with that?
As best I understand it, the section that we're amending here is unfair methods of competition regarding insurance, and I agree that you shouldn't discriminate against somebody that is applying for coverage because they have been a victim of sexual assault. If you were to think of the subject matter of health insurance, if somebody had been sexually assaulted and they had sustained some kind of sexually transmitted disease as a result of that, I could see an insurer saying, well, we want to exclude coverage for that type of circumstance or the psychiatric treatment you might need for it or whatever. We want to encourage them to cover that, but I don't want to encourage them to enable people to do this by providing coverage for their liability.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 6th for a question.
Will the senator yield?
I'd be glad to yield.
This really goes back to Amendment 1, and I know you're there for Amendment 2, but you're very learned. Isn't it true that under Amendment 1, the patient would be able to see their doctor at in-network rates if that doctor was dropped by the plan during the year, preventing a bait-and-switch situation?
Wow, I love being asked questions on an amendment that I've barely read. It was on the screen. I do think that's part of the intent of it.
Thank you.
For what purpose does the senator from the 45th rise?
Can I ask him a question? I'm sorry.
For a question.
Would the chairman yield, please?
Be happy to yield.
You know, these amendments, I don't think anyone on the floor expected them, and I'm just concerned about on amendment number 2, you know, we have advanced dramatically in the issues of domestic violence and sexual assault, and I'm just really concerned that throwing these amendments in there without studying them for a period of time, that we may be disrupting a system. Are you very confident in these amendments?
I did not file or co-sponsor Amendment 1. I read it about 3 minutes ago, so I can't help you with that one.
Right.
On Amendment 2, when we get a bill over here from the House that is unchanged and it's about to head back for an agree-disagree, I'm very vigilant to make sure, especially when it came through a committee I don't serve on, that we're not having unintended consequences. And that's what I'm trying to prevent here. If I'm wrong, and Senate Research Office was wrong in their analysis of this bill, then perhaps we'll straighten that out in the agree-disagree process, and I'm willing to stand corrected. I'm just reading it in its plain English, and I don't want us to be doing something that's not the purported purpose of this bill, which is to increase coverage for people that have been victims of sexual assault. I want to increase health coverage for them, but I don't think this is in a section that applies only to health coverage. It's on unfair and deceptive practices by insurance companies. And in no way do I take the phrase sexual assault out on any of the other 3 pages here. It's just this subsection H, thanks to the senator from the 27th for pointing that out. So but yeah, we run a risk anytime we pass something through here. We might do something that's unintended.
Would you answer one last question?
More than one if you got
So
them.
in your opinion on amendment number 2, you're broadening the ability of victims to have a more substantial coverage.
I don't think that's what the amendment does.
Okay, tell me,
think-
because I don't
think
understand.
what the bill would do would require insurance companies to cover intentional sexual assaults. To let a person know if they have an insurance policy and they go rape somebody, they're going to be protected from individual exposure because they've got insurance that'll cover it. And that tends to support or enforce the wrongful conduct by letting a person avoid financial responsibility for it. And so the insurance company is going to take responsibility for that, and they're going to charge you to take responsibility of that by charging you a higher premium. So all of us good actors that would never sexually attack somebody are going to be paying higher liability rates than we otherwise would have, because companies can't exclude coverage for an intentional sexual assault. If Senate research is analyzing this correctly and it applies broader than just health insurance. Health insurance doesn't usually provide indemnification coverage, and it's using that language here. So I don't think this applies only to health insurance. If I'm wrong and Senate research was wrong on that, then we'll fix it in the agree-disagree process, but I don't think that's what it does. I think it's an unintentional consequence of having been included in the original bill.
Senator, continue to yield.
Be glad to.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 18th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Does the senator yield?
I yield to the co-sponsor of the amendment.
Thank you, Senator. I did co-sponsor that, and given the questions from the good senator from Gwinnett, I wanted to ask you, Senator, perhaps we ought not to consider, rather than striking lines 111 through 114, should we consider striking only the added language of or sexual assault, those three words on line 113? Do you have a copy, Senator?
I do now, yeah.
Such that it would maintain the current statutory structure we have of this in dealing with domestic violence.
I would view that as a friendly amendment that's more precise than what I did.
Thank you, Senator.
Call that 2A if you want to draw it up real quick.
I'll try to get that to you. Thank you, Senator.
Do you continue to yield?
Be glad to.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 20th.
Would the senator yield, please?
I'd be glad to.
I think you raised some real good concerns with this bill, because it starts off, it does look like it involves health insurance, but then on line 108 it talks about covered property, which clearly would not be health insurance, so that looks like it's property and casualty insurance. And so I start thinking about a homeowner's policy. And is it your understanding the way this reads is this would require homeowners coverage to provide liability coverage for an intentional criminal act?
I don't know if it would be as to the liability coverage, but it would seem to read that way for property damage coverage. If there's some, but I don't know out of context. You in the insurance industry probably would know better than I do on that one.
And of course, lines 111 through 114, most of that's not new language, but it basically seems like it's restricting exclusions on your policy for the intentional act of family violence or sexual assault.
It covers family violence, but not sexual assault by a non-family member under current law. And I think that's what the senator from the 18th was pointing out, that it's really the sexual assault that broadens it to people outside of the family unit.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
You have no more questions.
Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the well and ask for you to please consider supporting Amendment 2.
For what purpose does the senator from the 45th rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Mr. President, I'd like to ask for germaneness on amendment number 1 and a ruling, please.
On amendment number 1, give me a moment. Thank you, Senator. It is the ruling of the chair that the fundamental purpose of the original bill was to protect sexual assault victims from discrimination by insurance companies. And the fundamental purpose of amendment number 1 is to mandate coverage by insurance companies regarding provider networks and therefore is ruled non-germane. We will not consider amendment number 1. Mr. Secretary, will you read Amendment 2A for us?
Amendment 2A by Senator Kennedy of the 18th offers the following amendment. Amend Amendment 2 to House Bill 227 by removing the words striking lines 111 through 114 and replacing them with striking or sexual assault on line 113. Mr. President, that concludes the order.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 18th to speak to Amendment 2A.
Thank you, Mr. President. I brought to you Amendment 2A, which narrows Amendment 2, and I think based on some of the good comments from the senator from Gwinnett County during those comments, realized that we might be possibly upsetting the current statutory structure with regard to domestic and family violence. And so I think the way to address what I think are absolutely legitimate concerns by the senator from Athens about adding the words or sexual assault, I think the way to balance that back out to not go too far but maintain what we have is to simply strike on lines 113 the words or sexual assault, which are the only 3 words that are sought to be added in Section H of the proposed bill. So I think that should satisfy the senator from Gwinnett's concerns and also largely address the concerns that the senator from Athens and I had initially with this proposed language. Be happy to answer any questions.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 48th for a question.
Does the senator yield?
I do.
I'm sorry, I just don't understand. If we are not unreasonably restricting the ability of victims of family violence or victims of sexual assault, that's just clarifying. I don't see where this is problematic. I'm not following your logic. If you could explain to me how this is not necessary. I just don't understand.
Sure. Well, Senator, I think the senator from Athens went through and explained the basis for the amendment number 2. That really addresses your question. And it is simply that this language, as written on line 113, has, I think, the large, significant potential to have an unintended consequence of making insurance contracts and policies of insurance much more broadly for liability purposes than was intended, and this changes that significantly.
Does the senator further
Sure.
yield? I'm reading this as victims of sexual assault, not the persons who would actually be sexually assaulting, which is what I understood the senator from Athens as talking about, that he didn't want to have the offenders be able to be protected. But this language protects the victim. That's the way I'm reading that. And I apologize, we just probably don't agree.
Sure. Well, I don't, and I appreciate the question. I'll answer this before I yield. I think you have to read this in its entire context. You have to go back to the top of line 111, and it says that no person shall use any exclusion or limitation. Now, the person there would be the insurance carrier, right? Okay. Shall use an exclusion or limitation, which the commissioner has determined through approval processes to unreasonably restrict the ability of victims of family violence or sexual assault to be indemnified for such losses. The or such losses is not defined in the context of this statute, number one. Number two, when this statute was last amended clearly, or maybe when it was originally drafted, it clearly was intended for the purpose of family violence. You've now inserted or sexual assault, and you've changed the whole the complexion of what the scope of potential liability is under this section without having gone back and revamped it with that in mind. That's the problem with it.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 36th for a question.
Thank you, Senator Yield. Senator, following that line of questioning that you just entertained, if you will yield for a further question, why would we not want to keep insurance companies from unreasonably restricting the ability of victims of sexual assault to be indemnified?
Senator, I appreciate the question, and it's not a desire for victims of sexual assault not to be compensated, is that this statute, as originally intended and as written, deals with family violence. By throwing those words in particular with regard to subsection H, you've now potentially blown up the potential liability of a carrier, number one. Number two, you're going to be in an odd situation where those policies are going to have exclusions, as all of our insurance policies do, for intentional acts. And so without this being thoroughly vetted for that purpose, we're going to wind up with some bad legislation here.
Further question.
Sure.
The victims of family violence can get indemnified for losses under this current statute as it stands now.
That is not the intent, Senator, that's not the intended purpose as the statute and as the proposed bill was explained. It's not for that particular person. I'm sorry, I only brought the one page my amendment is dealing with, so I don't have the whole
I'm on that page as well, line
statute.
111, yeah.
But what is specifically addressed here is the potential with regard to the insurance carriers who are going to have and do have language in their policies that exclude and have exclusions for intentional acts. This touches upon that, I think, unintentionally, based upon what has been explained by the author of the bill as the purpose of this legislation.
When you say intentional acts, if you'll further yield, there's no such thing as unintentional sexual assault, is there? Or maybe we don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but I mean, an act of family violence is an intentional act in most cases, broadly speaking.
Senator, you're probably right. Certainly, I think on its surface, I think anyone who's a victim of violence certainly feels like it was an intentional act. When you get into family violence, you get into all sorts of permutations and different circumstances that are very different when you're talking about domestic issues, and I'm sure you're.
But it's currently, if I could, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, Senator, but it's currently under the language of the current statute, paragraph H, line 111 through 113, it does state that the insurance company could not use exclusions or limitations to unreasonably restrict the ability of victims of family violence to be indemnified. That's correct. That's current law.
Yes.
And there is that prohibition on insurance companies to not unreasonably restrict.
Yes.
Through use of exclusions or limitations on coverage. So where's the rub on including sexual assault?
Because, Senator, you've expanded the potential liability beyond that which was intended by this legislation as explained by the author. If that is the proposal and you want to make insurance companies responsible for the victimization of someone at the hands of a perpetrator, you need to drop that bill, and you need to be specific, and you need to say that's the public policy shift that you're seeking. But that's not what was intended by this as explained by the author, and it is only the ambiguous language in H, subparagraph H, that potentially creates this potential liability. If in fact, Senator, if that's what you seek or you would want this legislation to do, then you ought to propose legislation that says that, so this body understands that's the intent. But that's not what was explained by the author, and that's not what was intended by this as explained by anyone until the senator from Athens identified this as a possible unintended consequence.
Well,
and again, this is not about trying, not wanting victims of sexual assault to go after their perpetrators. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with the extent and how will exclusions in current insurance contracts be construed by the courts if, in fact, this is going to be changed.
Well, you've made constant or repeated references to how the author explained the bill, but that's really an aside as to understanding what the bill on its face says.
Senator, I disagree.
Yeah.
It's not an aside. When we propose legislation and we tell our colleagues this is the purpose, this is the intent, this is what it's going to do, And then once somebody in this body identifies something and says, wait a minute, we've got some verbiage here that's going to do something very different from what was explained to this body as the intent, the purpose, and how it would be implemented, we have to take pause and make sure we don't have those unintended consequences. So I think the author's intent is very important, because that sets the framework under which we view legislation as to how it's going to be implemented in the real world once it gets passed, if it's signed by the governor.
And it's true that the person in the well who explained the bill didn't write the bill. He presented a bill that was written and passed by the member of the House.
Senator, you're technically right, but for purposes of presenting it in this body, I think he takes ownership of it, as we all do for the bills that we come to the well and speak to.
And so, for the question, then if one believes that the insurance company shouldn't be able to block indemnification for a victim of sexual assault, they should vote against this amendment, because the bill as written does exactly that to insurance companies. Isn't that right?
Senator, I think I don't think it's clear one way or the other, because of the language with regard to where it says limitations in coverage on what the commissioner has determined through the policy filing. I think it's vague and it's ambiguous, and I think what the senator from Athens, the senator from 46th, was simply pointing out is here's a possible construction of this language in a way that is not consistent with what was explained to us, and to avoid that possibility and that ambiguity in this vague language, I think we go back to the way it is now, and if in fact there's a desire to change public policy in a way like you're describing, that can be done in legislation. And that's one of the reasons, rather than striking all of H, I didn't want that limitation to befall and be a limit on victims of family violence, which we currently have in the law. I didn't want to take that out. I want that retained. And with regard to the other, let's keep it until we know what we're doing.
And so if we do want to include victims of sexual assault, we would vote against this amendment, which in its form offered to us would strip sexual assault protection for them in order to get indemnification.
No, Senator, I disagree with that. You keep trying to put me in that box, and that's not fair, because I've told you this is multiple times. This language is vague. It is ambiguous. We are not sure exactly what this means. Even if you keep saying if you vote yes, this is what happens. If you vote no, this is what happens. I don't think it's clear either way.
Well,
and to avoid the potential unintended consequence, let's just take the additional wording out on H, keep the statute the way it is.
There's further conversation we could have, but I think we have tried the patience of the body, and it's the last.
I think we have,
bill,
Senator.
So I will take my seat and thank you for
Senator, you have no more questions.
Thank you. I yield the well.
All right, we're going to take up the amendments. For what purpose does the senator from the 45th rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
It is very obvious that a lot of us are confused on amendment number 2, and I'm going to ask for the germaneness of amendment number 2 also, because I think it's an expansion.
One moment. Stand at ease. State your inquiry.
I'm sorry, I misstated. It's 2A.
The ruling of the chair that 2A is germane, and it's simply striking language from the measure. At this point, we're going to take up the amendments. First, we will take up 2A. 2A. The question is on the adoption of Amendment 2A. Is there objection to the adoption of the amendment? There's objection. All those in favor of the adoption of the amendment from the senator from the 18th will rise, stand, and be counted. Rise, stand, and be counted. State your inquiry.
Motion for the yeas and nays.
Are there additional senators that are calling for the yeas and the nays? There are. All right. All those in favor of the amendment from the senator from the 18th will vote yea. Opposed, nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. For what purpose does the senator from the 26th rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your
Mr.
inquiry.
President. Mr. President, isn't it true if you don't do the amendment, this will go in on a policy, insurance companies then will do an actuarial study and add it to everybody's policy. And the only thing this does, it leaves it where it is. If you do a HO3, you got liability coverage on it. Now, whether or not it's adjudicated in court as to whether or not the potential for the homeowner to be found guilty by a jury. On renters, you only get your furniture covered, except that you can buy a liability clause in case somebody comes on the property where you live and you break your leg.
On the adoption of the amendment, the yeas are 22, the nays are 28, and the amendment is lost. We'll now take up amendment number 2. The question is on the adoption of amendment number 2. Is there objection to adoption of the amendment? There's objection. All those in favor of the amendment from the 46th will vote yea, opposed nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. For what purpose does the senator from the 45th rise?
Is it not true if you voted on the last one no, that you should vote no on this one also?
I'm sure the senator knows of what she speaks. For what purpose does the senator from the 36th rise?
Is it not true that this amendment, original amendment number 2, would change current law, would weaken the laws that we already have in place if it were to pass? Is
I'm
that
certain
not
the
true?
senator knows of what she speaks. On the adoption of the amendment, the yeas are 17, the nays are 34, and the amendment is lost. All right, now we will take up the measure as a whole. Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the bill? The chair hears none, and the previous question is ordered. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which is favorable to the passage of the bill? Chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall the main question be now put? Are there any objections? The chair hears none. The main question is ordered. Shall this bill now pass? The question is on the passage of the bill. All those in favor will vote yea. Opposed, nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 38, the nays are 13. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Okay. All right, we'd like to take a quick second to introduce some special guests today that were late getting here because they had some bus problems, but I'd like to call upon the senator from the 2nd to introduce our special guest today.
Thank you, members of the Senate. I stand with the senator of the 1st to honor a great team. Johnson High School Atom Smashers girls basketball team has accomplished 3 straight Final Fours, 2 straight state title games, and 2 state championships. I'd like to recognize the young ladies in the stand, the undergrads of Johnson High School Atom Smashers. The team, please stand, please. Okay, good, okay. The Atom Smashers knocked off Hart County High School Greater Atlanta Championship and the GHSA Class AAA Championship. the Johnson girls basketball team has won the 2 consecutive state championships. The head basketball coach is behind me, Coach Brandon Lindsay, and the school's AD, Ms. Trumbull, with 4 of the seniors. We will now hear from Coach Brandon Lindsay to introduce his senior.
Good afternoon. I would like to thank Lieutenant Governor Duncan and the esteemed members of the Georgia State Senate for this tremendous honor and recognition. Words cannot express how honored I am to be here this afternoon to receive this recognition in the midst of you all handling Georgia State business. In any case, if you would just bear with us a few moments, I would like to introduce to you all our Athletic Director, Ashley Trumbull-Hamer, and Jasmine Thompson, our senior Jasmine Thompson, and she would like to share a few words with you all.
Good afternoon. On behalf of the Lady Adam Smashers basketball team and coaching staff, we would like to thank you all for first inviting us and also offering this great opportunity. And also, we would like to acknowledge the rest of our teammates as this could not have been accomplished without everyone's contribution as a whole. Thank you again.
Mr. Secretary, will you read the resolution?
Senate Resolution 447 by Senator Jackson II and others, a resolution committing the Johnson High School girls basketball team for winning the 2019 GHSA 3A State Basketball Championship and for other purposes.
Is there objection to adoption of the resolution? The chair hears none, and the resolution is adopted. Thank you again for joining us today. Thank you. Mr. Secretary, will you read the caption to House Bill 311?
House Bill 311 by Representative Welch of the 110th and others, a bill be titled enactment in Chapter 21 of Title 50, Title 36, Part 1 of Article 3 of Chapter 3 of Title 23, and Code Section 5634 of the OCGA relating waiver of sovereign immunity, shows the actions ex contractu and state tort claims, provisions applicable to counties, municipal corporations, and other governmental entities, conventional qui tam, and judgments and rulings deemed directly appealable, procedure for review of judgments, orders, or decisions not subject to direct appeal, scope of review, hearings in criminal cases involving a capital offense for which death penalty is sought, and appeals involving non-monetary judgments in child custody cases and for other purposes. Mr. President, Senate Committee on Judiciary offers the following substitute to House Bill 311, bill will be titled enactment Chapter 21, Title 50, and Title 36, Part 1 of Article 3 of Chapter 3 of Title 23, and Code Section 5634 of the OCGA relating to waiver of sovereign immunity as to actions ex contracted state tort claims, local government, conventional qui tam, and judgments and ruling deemed and for other purposes. Mr. President, that concludes the order.
Chair recognizes a senator from the 18th to speak to House Bill 311.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon. Colleagues, bring to you House Bill 311. Some of this may be somewhat familiar to you because over the last few years there have been attempts to address the issue of limiting sovereign immunity for our state. I was not involved in those, but I'm told a few years ago that the bill really went too far in which they were trying to restrict sovereign immunity, and then more recently the bill didn't go far enough, so this is what's being dubbed as the Goldilocks bill. Hopefully it is just right. I think we're all familiar with the concept of sovereign immunity. It's that going back to Old English law that you can't sue the king. Those same concepts are found in American jurisprudence in which typically our state governments, sometimes federal governments, cannot be sued. This seeks to address that and open the possibility for citizens to sue their government where you are seeking declaratory or injunctive relief. That is the thrust behind this. The problem right now we have is that in the event that we have a county government, a state, local government that is actively engaged in something that is unconstitutional, there's no way to challenge that because of the sovereign immunity laws that we have. This simply allows citizens to do that, something that is probably at the core of democracy as anything else we can vote on or any principle we can put in our form of government, to simply say, give citizens the opportunity in the event that the government is engaged in an unconstitutional act, that we have the right to go to the courts and invoke the judicial branch of our government and say, wait a minute, there's something going on that shouldn't be done. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
You have a question. Chair recognizes the senator from the 38th for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the gentleman yield?
I will for my friend from the 38th.
Is there not, we are talking about counties, municipal corporations, and consolidated government. Do we not have in all forms of that type of government elected positions? And as a citizen, if I have a problem with what my elected official does, we can not vote for them the next time.
Senator, that's correct. But as we know, some of those folks have 2-year terms, some have 4-year terms. And if, in fact, they, as the controlling agent for a local government, be it a county or a state or a city, a municipal government, are engaged in wrongful acts that are affecting and injuring our citizens shouldn't have to wait until the election time to try to stop wrongful conduct at the hands of actors on behalf of our government. This doesn't determine that it's wrongful. It just allows a citizen to go into court and ask a judge to direct or ask that actor, that government actor, stop what they're doing because it is unconstitutional. That would be in the form of injunctive relief that could be asked for.
Will the gentleman further yield?
Yes.
Can we not recall the bad actor?
You can, but that takes time, Senator. And if you're the victim, if you're someone who's being victimized or you're being injured at the hands of an elected official that's acting beyond the scope of their power, beyond the scope of what they're supposed to do, beyond the scope of what our Constitution says they can and cannot do, I hope we don't have to wait until election time to get that rectified. And that's why this bill allows someone, you, your family, your constituent, to simply go to the judicial branch and say, wait a minute, we've got a government actor here that's acting in ways that our Constitution says they cannot behave. And they're doing things that's injuring our citizens. I certainly hope we wouldn't have to wait 3.5 years to have that redressed at the ballot box and then keep our fingers crossed in hopes that folks understand all of that and vote them out of office.
I will restate, if you would allow me. The last question I asked you is, can we not recall the person? We allowed to do recalls. We have, which we might be able to do sooner. And my last question had to be dealt with recalling the person as another way of getting them out sooner.
Senator, not only am I not an expert, I'm not even knowledgeable on election law with regard to recalls and how that works. I know that it's a time-consuming process. I know that it's difficult. I know that it's onerous. And I know it's typically very hard to get someone who's elected recalled. I'm not aware, and although I'm an attorney, I'm not familiar with any particular provisions that allow for an allegation of unconstitutional conduct on behalf of someone who's elected to have a shortened or truncated time period in which citizens have to try to address that behavior. And again, I certainly hope we wouldn't expect, when folks are behaving in ways that are unconstitutional, that we have to go through all the trouble of having them recalled from office.
Will the gentleman further yield?
Yes, ma'am.
How long does it take under normal circumstances to sue a person? Isn't that in some instances a lengthy process? I mean, I sue you and I've got to go through what the legal process is. Is that a short process? It may be shorter than what I think it is.
Senator, it can be, and in fact, thank you for that question, because in cases in which you're seeking injunctive relief, the plaintiff filing suit would typically ask that the court intervene on an expedited basis, because it is the court, not a jury. You don't have to typically have discovery. You don't have a jury trial. You don't go through those things that so many of us think and agree is an overly lengthy process. You draft the complaint, you serve the parties, and then a judge would hold a hearing as to whether or not injunctive relief ought to be granted on an interim basis, and then there could be further determinations later on. So I think, to the heart of your question, and I appreciate it, is to go to court and ask for injunctive relief would be much quicker, much less involved, much less expensive, and less onerous on the electorate to get something done to stop someone who's behaving outside of what our Constitution says an elected person can behave.
I thank the gentleman so much for his explanations.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. I appreciate the questions.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 6th for a question.
Will the gentleman yield?
I do.